morning, everybody. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District. Today is Saturday, May 9th, and the time is 8 a.m., and I hereby call this meeting to order. Michael, do you have some announcements?
Yeah, welcome to the Kirkwood Meadows PUD regular board meeting. This meeting is fed live over the internet, and the public can view this meeting by going to KMPUD.com and following the appropriate link. If the public would like to make a comment or ask a question, please email the district at msharp@kmp.com, and the board will respond appropriately. I'd like to welcome Michelle Gamble is here today, our project manager for the Out Valley project, and thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Peter, would you please call the roll?
Sure. Rickard? Here. Andy? Here. O'Grady?
Here.
Dornberg here, and Epstein?
Here.
Okay, full board.
So item 4 is oral communications, public input, opportunity for members of the public to address the board on non-agenda items relating to district business. No action can be taken by the board on matters not appearing on the agenda. Anybody have any? Well, I have one. We have an email that I received yesterday from Nancy Trevette on 2 subjects. One is budget 2016 and beyond, and the other is beginning idea on how to respond. I'd like to read the first paragraph of each, just because I think that while we can't take any action, they're related to some of the things that we're going to discuss, if that's okay with you.
Please.
Budget 2016 beyond. As you are aware, the 2016 through 2020 budget is on the board's agenda for review / consideration / input. Again, it would be the hope that the PUD board would consider holding a budget study meeting prior to adoption of the 2016 budget in June that would afford the community, I think, the opportunity to participate, study / ask questions about this budget by devoting a part of a day to this opportunity and using the same / similar format that was used for the public hearing on snow removal. Ample community notice about this possible budget study meeting should, of course, occur. And the second input is on the topic of beginning idea and how to respond. In any event, one repeated question arises: is the district operating more leanly now than before it took on power / propane operations? There does not seem to be any urgency on the part of the district to operate differently and more cost effectively, even though there have been personnel reductions and capital projects are not planned for 2016. If this statement is not true, it is invisible to the community / ratepayers, and the community does care about what is not transpiring. So again, no action can be taken, but we appreciate the oral communications and public input. Any other? I guess that's it. Okay. Yes, Michael.
I have one item.
Sure.
I choose to talk about this now because it happened and it's very important, so I'd like to talk about it at the beginning of the meeting. At 4:35 a.m. on Thursday, the district suffered an Out Valley power outage. At 4:42, Brandy Fitchner and Sean Kennedy responded to the powerhouse and found that genset number 2 was on and that the lift feeder was closed. So we had power to our lift feed. The residential and commercial feeds were open, no power. Staff turned on the step-up transformer to genset number 3, warmed it up, synced it, and turned it on. Power was restored to the valley at 4:50, and so we had a 15-minute power outage. So what happened? And I hope you can all see my board and you know exactly what these symbols mean, because we're so versed in this. So what happened was that PG&E had a transient fault, which means a really sudden, a momentary fault on their Salt Springs to Tiger Creek line. And we have a 3-way protection scheme that when that fault happened, Salt Springs, Tiger Creek, and the KMPUD all opened. okay, so that they trip the breakers. And after a certain amount of time, Salt Spring closed, and then, a minute or so later, Tiger Creek closed, and this reestablished this connection. So it was just transient. It was very severe weather down there, so it could have been wires slapping together, or who knows, lightning strikes close to it. It was just a momentary thing that resolved itself. However, the KM Green 115 should have closed within 3 minutes. It should have regained the power and restored power to the line. It didn't. It didn't reclose. So this started a series of events that I'll go through now. Due to this not reclosing, the 34K line breaker did not reclose. If this had reclosed, this would have automatically closed and restored power within 3 minutes. But it did not, because this didn't close. So that started, because this didn't close, KM Blue didn't close, and we had a power outage for longer than the period of time that a transient fault should have. Within 10 seconds of this transient fault, the powerhouse, the generator started up. You remember, Bob, that we didn't want to wait for this. We'll just start up these generators because they take a little bit of time to warm up. So within 10 seconds, generator 1 started up and generator 2 started up. We have 2 generators on. Generator 1 failed. It had a fuel issue and it failed. Generator 2 stayed on, and the lift feed was the first one to, as our program, closed and resumed power. However, the residential and the commercial could not close because we're programmed to have 2 generators on because the inflow of power, if you don't, we'd have too much inflow and it would knock it out. Generator 3 didn't turn on because we had the step-up transformer turned off to save power in our performance reporting efforts. So staff got there within 7 minutes, and thank you very much to you and your staff. But it wasn't without controversy. Within the 10 seconds, the wastewater treatment plant actually failed, and we have alarm systems that actually told our operators, you have a failure, and Volcano called Dan Fine, who responded immediately, saw that there was a power outage and called Brandy. The automatic system for Burgarello Alarm to call our operator and let her know that we have an outage didn't work. They didn't call her. So thank goodness we had a backup system. I guess this is the reoccurring theme. Our backup systems worked beautifully, but we did have failures. So our electrical alarm system didn't work, but our wastewater did work, and we were able to notify our people and get them out there. The John Deere number 1, which is at the powerhouse, started up, resumed power to the district facilities, and then it failed. The old Betsy actually turned on as reliably as always and picked up the power and resumed power for the entire district. But because of this event, the wastewater treatment plant had a blip of power, and whenever we have a blip of power at the wastewater treatment plant, we have issues. Filtrate pump number 3 failed, and the SCADA system failed. Filtrate pump number 3 lost a BFD, which we're going to have to replace, but we have filtrate pumps number 1 and 2 that picked up the slack, and our redundancy once again worked. The SCADA system had a COM failure with the command module. We think that's an Ethernet switch, but that was able to be reset, and it is working. We did have several hours of not processing water, but we have 5 days of storage at this time of year, so we were pretty safe. So when we look, when we take away, what did we take away from this experience? Because I think that's the most important thing. The district equipment systems worked the way they were supposed to, and our redundancy worked extremely well. However, and I got to say, district staff responded very well to the emergency. However, PG&E's 115 relay didn't work. We're in contact with PG&E to find out why this didn't reclose, as is the three-way termination, and that started the whole issue. We have a problem with the electric outage notification with Bergarello, and Rick will be in contact with them. The powerhouse generator number 1 failed, and Brandy's staff will be looking into why that failed. The wastewater treatment plants, John Deere number 1 failed. And of course, we had a couple of issues with the plant that we're dealing with. So overall, I think that our redundancy worked really well for us. We minimized the outages, even though we did have some problems. It was a good learning experience. And incredibly, it happened on the same day as an operations capital committee, which is 3 for 3. We've had 3 problems with the Out Valley project, and all of them have happened on Thursdays on the same day as Peter's meeting. So.
Pretty obvious how you fix that for me.
We will no longer have any of these meetings.
What time did you switch back to Out Valley?
So we sent a crew down to KM Green, because once this 3-minute lag, this does not automatically reclose. Now, when Dave Rightly comes out in June, he's going to make it so we could reclose this. But we don't have the ability to reclose this, and we had to manually reclose the 115 because PG&E's system didn't work. So we sent a crew back. Brandy, what do you think, 11 o'clock?
I think it was around 10 o'clock.
Around 10 o'clock. So the lift feed had about a 3-minute outage, which we would have expected. The rest of the valley had about a 15-minute outage.
So Michael, so the 115 breaker at KM Green is owned by PG&E?
No, we own it and we operate it for PG&E. And this is an interesting...
I'm sorry. We own it, but we operate it for PG&E?
Right. They operate it on the relay system, but we can manually operate it.
Oh,
right.
We have permission to manually operate it. But we own it or they own it?
We own it. And that's kind of an interesting...
But they've got to operate it to satisfy their protection scheme.
Right, so they trust us to manually operate it and maintain it, even though it's part of their protection scheme. And this is a huge issue in regards to our discussions with the risks and benefits of moving this breaker down to Salt Springs, because we already are maintaining and owning a piece of equipment that is vital to their 3-way protection.
So if it had been the case that were down at Salt Springs, which is what they're currently requiring us to do, if it had been there, would the situation been identical, theoretically, or different?
If this had failed, the situation would have been identical. Yeah.
It wasn't a function of where it's located, it was a function of something else.
Right. So let's talk about if that fault had not been, and I'll be real quick here, Standard. If that fault hadn't been here, but on this line, the connection line, which is now 1.1 miles long, and it had failed, Salt Springs and Tiger Creek could not have reclosed. And that would have impacted them if this had not, if the fault was here, they would not have been able to reclose. But here at this pole, this massive pole, 0/1, there's motorized switches where they could have motorized closed these and resumed power that way. So it's very important that this be maintained correctly, and of course, as we can see, operating correctly.
But it's up to PG&E to tell us why it didn't close properly.
Correct. Yeah, it's part of their relays. All that RTU checking, and we know that they simulated faults in this manner, but this is a real fault and it didn't work.
But to Eric's point, if we go through with the switch station, would we reconstruct exactly what we have at KM Green down at Salt Springs?
Yeah, as far as the 115 line, yes.
Yeah, so it would just take us that much longer to get down there.
Yes.
It's actually more accessible in the wintertime. Slightly.
Yeah,
I think
more
the road-
accessible,
the
but they're
road-
longer.
It's longer, but depending
It's
on
lower.
whether you're getting the snow cap.
Right.
Go ahead, if it ever snows again.
Thanks for that.
We have a comment from the public, not about this subject, wondering if there's any announcement or statement from yesterday's closed session meeting. Of course, there was at the closed session. It's up to you whether you want to make a statement on what transpired.
Sure, why don't you summarize it briefly, like you did yesterday?
Sure. The district discussed two issues. One being the electric connection fees, and we decided to take another look at our electric connection fee charges. And the second was the Rabobank, and Rabobank appears to be settling.
So we took no action on the second one. Any other oral communications? Hearing none. Item 5 is corrections to the agenda or consent calendar. And we have a consent agenda here with 4 items on it. The first consent is the minutes. The action is to approve the minutes from the April 11th, 2015 board meeting. The second consent item is employee manual revision on-call policy, and the action is the approval of resolution 15-06, adopting revised employee handbook. The third consent item is consent for claims, approval of current consent for claims, and the fourth is receivables / shutoffs, and the action is review of current receivables / shutoffs. Does anybody want to make any modifications to the agenda or consent calendar? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Approve the consent agenda. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. So we'll move on to item 8, which is new / unfinished business and action items. 8A is the discussion and possible action regarding the district's financials, efforts to reduce expenses, and financial impacts of the continuing drought on the district's finances. So we have Assistant Manager Jill Campbell. Welcome.
Morning. We'll go ahead and start with March financials. The balance sheet is on page 4 of the packet. Showing our operating cash at the end of March is $2,626,000. It is $246,000 down from plan. This is pretty closely relates to our accounts receivable variance in the balance sheet. Our accounts receivables are down $227,000 from plan due to revenues being down. Another thing I wanted to mention on the balance sheet is there is currently a balance in assets under construction in progress. There is a $986,000 balance. $715,000 of that is Out Valley that hasn't been completed, and $123,000 we have for the switch station that has been started. I'll go ahead and move on to the income statement unless there are any questions. Our March revenues are down $157,000 from plan. Year-to-date revenues are down $749,000 from plan. In the combined income statement, under G&A allocations and other non-operating income, there is a $100,000 allocation. That is an allocation of property taxes that we did make to the electric fund to cover the tier ratio. It's shown in G&A and other. It kind of crosses itself out because of how Russ has us allocating. They like property taxes to be below the line at this point. So currently March is showing a net income of $56,000. It's about $9,400 down from plan, while year-to-date net loss is $34,000. And on this income statement, it is showing that it's above plan by $311,000. The reason it still looks good, there are a couple items that have been discussed before. Our depreciation expense is down from plan, mostly because the Out Valley project isn't complete, as well as interest expense. We've, per the auditors, have capitalized more than that. So I did want to show, while March does look good on our income statement, we did kind of a simple slide. If we took out the differences between depreciation and interest expense, which we're saying is basically a one-time savings, if those two things weren't included, we would actually be down about $333,000 from plan year-to-date through March. And then at the bottom, I was just showing, we'll discuss, I have the April projected net income at a loss of $100,000, and then just taking our May and June budgeted net losses combined. Year-to-date right now, projected year-end, we're looking about $600,000 down from plan if we don't consider the depreciation and interest expense.
What is our depreciation for the year forecasted to be? That's our major non-cash item, right?
It is,
I guess we can figure that out.
I have that on the budget.
So if it's 232 through March, then it's
Depreciation is about, we're showing year 2.5 is our projected combined depreciation.
2.5.
2.5 million for year end. That's what I have on the income statement, on the budget for 2015 actual.
Okay, thanks. I'll come back to that.
So, in a way, what we're saying is, if on the income statement, the loss will be, how much? It's minus 606, minus 606,000. Year-end projected net income, negative 600,000.
Yes.
So, in a way, what we're doing is we're not covering all of that $2.5 million of depreciation.
Correct.
We're covering 1.9 million of it, but not 600,000 of it.
And this also does not include principal payments.
Yeah,
It's
which
just
is
a
not an
tax.
income statement
Right.
thing, that's a cash thing, yeah.
That's what we're talking about. So just a couple of items for March on our individual departments. Wanted to mention on wastewater, through March, wastewater has a net loss of $34,000. Our year-to-date net loss through March in wastewater is $346,000. If you don't include depreciation, through March, wastewater is at a cash loss of $55,000. Electric on page 14, year-to-date revenues are down $436,000 from plan. In March, we are showing a negative number in other revenues. That's due to the board approving the reversal of the Vail penalties from January. And as mentioned before, in March, we did allocate $100,000 in property tax revenues to cover the tier ratio. So our year-to-date net income through March is showing a positive $38,000. It is showing down from plan quite a bit because in the budget we planned on allocating all property tax revenues to electric, and we're just doing it right now as needed.
So, Jill, does that basically mean that we do have property tax revenues available to cover the wastewater and water?
Right now, we do.
Right now.
They're sitting in there. We have until the end of the year to allocate those. So number one, depending on how electric does the next few months.
Actually, you have until the end of June to allocate for this fiscal year.
Right.
And then,
Propane, our year-to-date propane revenues are down $416,000 from plan. And right now, year-to-date, our propane is showing a net loss of $16,000. And there is, depreciation is showing quite a bit less than plan in propane. We're still working with the auditors on this. It was found at the last audit that we were over depreciating the MU acquisition, the propane portion. So it was their direction to stop the allocation of depreciation for part of this year. So I'm still working on reconciling that, but just wanted to bring that up. That is the reason that's down.
Jill, do you know how much of the shortfall in the propane revenues is due to the credits we're providing because the propane isn't so costly
Yeah.
versus just less use of propane?
In propane, there's a propane fuel surcharge showing a negative revenue year-to-date of $272,000. And that pretty closely relates to our decrease in that expense.
Right.
Propane fuel is down $220,000. Is that the question?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I think it's important to note that the propane thing, sometimes the revenues will look lower than what we had planned, but it's only because we're not charging for something that we don't have to pay for.
And in this, I kind of reversed that.
Yeah.
So if you look at the revenues, they're not down quite as bad
Yeah.
through March as the income statement shows. I netted out the difference between the decreased revenue.
I also think part of the problem is, one way of presenting this would be as a cost of goods sold, and then these two things would net out
Yeah.
themselves, because we don't really want that as revenue
Right.
anyway. And it's the way it's presented that it makes it look that way.
That's all I have on March, unless there's any questions.
Any questions from the board or the audience? Why don't you keep going?
Okay. On page 19 of the packet is a combined preliminary income statement for April. On this, the revenues are final and accurate. It's the expenses that haven't been closed that are our best guess at this point. So for April, our operating revenues are down $205,000 from plan. And our net loss for April is $100,000, which is about $100,000 down from plan. We'll go
And
ahead
we're
move on.
ahead year-to-date on operating income, probably because you've done something with the property taxes that I don't understand.
I'm sorry?
We're $987,000 of operating income year-to-date versus $546 budget. Why would that be?
are you talking about operating revenues at the end of April's forecast?
Total operating line.
Total operating line.
That's in bold.
I guess I'm wondering, both where it says total operating, we're $987,000 versus $546, so we're $440,000 ahead. And a similar question is, our losses through April are $134,000 versus budgeted losses of $346, so again, we're ahead. How can we?
This is still because of the depreciation and interest.
Okay.
I didn't change that on this version.
Okay.
Yeah, that was just done on this for
Okay.
representation. But this follows the same format as the rest and shows those two.
questions on April? You want to keep going on to cash flow?
On page 20 is a 1-year operating cash waterfall. The goal is to make this a 5-year operating cash by department. We kept it as a 1 year. There were a few questions on the assumptions in the budget for cash that were discussed at the Finance Committee. So we do have direction on that, and we'll go through that in the budget. So at the next version, there will be a 5-year by department.
So this is pretty good. First of all, you know, our low point has shifted from December to September because of the debt payments. But secondly, the low point is almost $2 million. So it's 1942. I'm sure it'll be $2 million by the time you scrub it a little more.
Yeah.
Just a quick correction, of course, is the dates out at the right side should be 16, March 16 and April 16.
Thank you.
Any questions for Jill?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pleased because there was one point in which we were looking at cash balances that I think were significantly lower. I think the various efforts, we're now back to about where we think we should be.
Right.
And I think that's a major point we want to make is, you know, the forecast, you know, looked bad. And as a result of both efficiencies, reallocating of resources and the rest, the real loss for the year, ignoring the one-time things, is covered by property taxes, depending on the last 2 months of the year. And the rebudgeting and redesign puts us back on a normal cash flow. So my feeling, and I think we'll see that in the budget, is we've sort of readjusted everything. So if this year is the new normal, we know how to manage. And hopefully it's not the new normal, it's the new low.
Yeah.
But no one seems to be able to forecast that.
Well, plenty of people can try. But
Yeah, no one can forecast it accurately.
I think the other big takeaway is that, even though we are showing a net income loss, $2.5 million of depreciation is covering the interest and principal payments.
Right.
So we're not going broke.
Standish.
Yes.
Along those lines, I just wanted to reiterate staff's efforts on trying to reduce costs as much as possible. When you look at the numbers and you look at the income statements, you can see that operating expenses is actually a rather small piece of the large puzzle when you talk about debt service and depreciation and interest expense. But staff, and through the board's guidance, has made many moves in the last 4 months to make sure that our financials are in place. We've immediately reduced our snow removal staffing as soon as we saw that we weren't having a regular snow, and used regular staff to complete that task. We eliminated the fire department staffing that we had started up to try to expand our fire department. We reduced 3 positions of year-round staff people to also reduce that. We've eliminated all capital projects for the 2015 and for the entire 2016. We've reduced consultants for operations. We've reduced material and spending. Both of these issues have reduced expenses in operating by over 20%. Only inflation increase budgeted for staff for 15 and 16, and we have begun an aggressive campaign to lower costs through performance reporting, which has saved us, has really put a focus on how we can be more efficient in all of our services. And we're delaying certain projects such as water rights and other things to try to save money during this drought. Additionally, we are continuing to look at ways that we can save money through operations. We're looking at our staffing levels and making sure that the current staff is what we need for the summer and what we need to retain for the winter. We're reviewing future capital costs. We've actually reduced future capital costs in the budget that Joe will be presenting by over $200,000 a year for the next 5 years, just trying to slim down to do exactly what we need to do. We're looking at the switch station as a longer-term item so that possibly we can reduce costs in that way by further review. We've reduced consultants for operations and projects. I think the committee chairmen will notice that there weren't any consultants calling in, and the one that did call in yesterday during operations and capital did so on his own nickel. He asked to participate even though we weren't paying for it. We've reduced material and services purchases to a bare minimum. We now have no budget increase for staff for the next fiscal year, and we will continue our efforts through performance reporting. So I think that it's important to realize the steps that we're making and have made in the past to try to reduce operating expenses during this drought. And if the community or the board have further suggestions, we welcome them.
Thanks for that. I'll tell you from my perspective, the font on the second slide is a lot better than the font on the first slide.
Money on ink.
Yeah, that was it.
So you had,
Electricity.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's cheaper to project than the line.
Yeah, it's an excellent summary, and I think it does reflect a lot of diligence on the part of the staff and others to make this stuff happen in response to a tough situation. And if somehow we're not getting that message to the community, which is part of what I think your initial comment, your communication session implied, and I think we've got to be a little bit more in sales mode to make sure that people see that and understand it. If we elect to have a budget review process session, that might be a really good place to tee that up.
Thanks for doing that. Any other questions, comments on 8A?
Well, so just please make sure I understand this, because accounting is by far my weakest suit. So we're using money that went into a depreciation account. We're using it to cover things other than depreciation. The money's not there to be able to do capital improvements or things as we go forward. So we're just converting it to a different need, which is understandable and pressing. True or false?
That's not the way. Go ahead.
Yeah. I would think of it differently. I mean, the idea behind depreciation is you're taking money out of your expenses, because your equipment is worth less, right? But you're not actually paying it, but it's coming out of expenses, right? But it's not a cash implication. But at the same time, it's approximately the same as our debt service. So subtracting out the expense, but we don't have to write a check for it. That the cash is for debt. It happens. The debt service is about the same as depreciation.
Yeah, and the key thing is that our rates, particularly for electricity, but to some extent, the other rates include covering depreciation.
That's right.
So we're collecting cash for depreciation as much as we think is appropriate or necessary for in the case of electricity.
Yeah.
So we have the cash, and then how do we use the cash? We're now using that to pay off debt service.
Right.
Which reduces expenses.
But what we're not doing is putting it into a capital reserve fund to replace
If you need to.
systems that wear out over
Exactly.
time, which ideally is what you would do.
Right.
Ideally, that's what you would do.
That was my point. I understand it. It's,
Yeah.
I think if we had a normal or good year, cash might build up in a significant way.
And that is, right, if we assume normal years, which we're not in the budget, then that cash would be used to pay down debt at an accelerated rate. And we've lined up the debt schedule, so there's debt, that comes due that approximately matches the surplus cash if we had good years. And if we don't, we have to roll over it, which is all part of the budget discussion.
So anything else on district's financials and efforts to reduce expenses from the board or the audience?
Stanis had one of the.
Keep going, Michael. How many more do you have?
Just enough to get you past 10 o'clock.
This would fall under 8A4. mortgage tier ratio. In a proactive move, the district has written a letter to Russ detailing the 2014 district's electric financial result as compared to required tier ratios. The intent is to inform new Russ staff, and I repeat, new Russ staff. We've had a turnover in the Russ staff that we participate with. The use of the district property tax revenues can be used to meet mortgage covenants, and this has been discussed, and all forecasts of the district is based on this premise. Property tax revenues have been considered as non-operating margins other by prior Russ staff in an all approved forecast. As this is an important issue, the district wanted to get out in front of it in a proactive manner when dealing with new staff. So we're just reaffirming our use of property taxes to meet tier ratios and reaffirming this with new Russ staff.
So the letter basically said we didn't meet operating tier. We met tier because we included below the line. And we'd like to include it above the line, which would make us meet our operating tier and also make our income statement more understandable.
Yes,
sir. Thanks. Any response from them?
No. Not on this, and they're new, so they might just look at this as a notification.
Okay. Thank you, Jill. I assume we'll see you back there shortly.
Yes.
So moving on to 8B, discussion and possible action relating to the overbilling of electric charges to Vail Resorts for Chair 1 operation. Manager Sharp.
In November 2012, the district contracted with Emerson Network Power to verify that all of the district had accurate current transformer CT ratios associated with our large commercial meters. A CT is a multiplier used for our large accounts to accurately reflect consumption. On November 22nd, 2012, the district received a final report from Emerson which recommended a number of changes, including changes to the Mountain Club meter. Meadowstone HOA owed the district over $21,000. The KCA Recreation Complex had a adjustment, and snowmaking compressors were actually billed an additional $118,000. Meter for chair number 1 had originally had a meter multiplier of 120. On their report, they recommended that we change that to 400, which we did. In March 2015, as part of the performance reporting program, we had Emerson come back out and verify certain meters that were in question, including the pump house, I think you remember Chair 1, and several others. In their report, they note that the actual multiplier for Chair 1 should have remained at 120, and in discussions, Emerson confirmed that their earlier report had been incorrect. Attached is applying a spreadsheet showing how this change in the CT impacted Vail Resorts in an overbilling of approximately $215,000 over a period of 2.5 years. Staff recommends that the district credits this account in the amount of $7,400 per month over the same period that it was overbilled. This system is exactly the same way that we have handled over and under charges in the past due to meter issues. Staff also recommends that Emerson be asked to come back out free of charge to verify all 25 of our large meter CT multipliers, and then again in writing verify those amounts. And this has been discussed at the Finance Committee meeting.
Right. Finance Committee discussed this on Monday and agreed with the staff recommendation.
Questions, comments from the board?
Is there any reparation for the work poorly done the first time around? They gave us a bad report, paid them to give us a bad report, and asked for our money back.
We certainly can pursue that. We have not pursued that to date. We do feel that Emerson, who did all of our testing on the Out Valley line, overall has a good reputation and has done good work for the district in the past. So I'm confident that, you know, them knowing the seriousness of the situation, that they're going to do a very careful job in certifying our meters from this point forward. But if we want to seek any damages for past, that's something that we can certainly investigate.
I mean, my view is if staff has confidence in the vendor, I probably wouldn't do it because we basically got a loan for.
That's fine.
Any comments or questions from the audience? You need a motion for that, Michael?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, I move that we proceed with staff's recommendation.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. So 8C is where Jill gets to return for the 2016-2020 budget planning board review of the final draft with balance sheet and 5-year cash waterfall.
In the packet starting on page 27 is an updated draft of the 5-year budget. The main updates to this budget is there is now a 5-year balance sheet by quarter and a 5-year income statement by quarter. The last version only had 3 years. In the Finance Committee, there was an issue brought up with the 5-year balance sheet, mainly on our 2015 actual forecast. There were a couple numbers wrong that was kind of skewing this, so that has been corrected and will be distributed.
But it isn't corrected in this packet.
It's not corrected in this packet. Other changes in this version, if you want to go to the next one. Sorry. On the screen, there is a showing of each department and what the projected rates are going to be for each department for the next 5 years. And there have been some changes since the last version. For water, rates in 2017, 18, and 19 are budgeted to increase by 2% annually. That's both in base rate and the usage charge. That's we're showing that in order to make the department cash sufficient. Previously, the last version of electric rates was showing 65 cents through the next 5 years. This version is showing a more gradual decrease, showing usage 68 cents staying for this year, and then decreasing 1 cent per year going forward. Also, propane rates do assume an increase from 7.5 cents per cubic foot to 8.2 cents per cubic foot. In this version, that does show happening in 2016, but the plan is to change that and not have any increases until 2017. It's kind of too late to plan a rate increase for this next fiscal year. So those are the changes in the rates. We've also, I've kind of gone through all of the spreadsheets and scrubbed the numbers to make sure that formulas in all of the income statements were pulling correctly. The last version had an issue with the allocation of property taxes. That's been corrected. As far as cash, just want to mention that operating cash on the balance sheet assumes that the short-term loans will mature as planned. Starting in 2018 is when the short-term loans start maturing for Russ.
And that's why cash goes down.
That's why cash on the balance sheet goes down. That was discussed with finance, whether we wanted to show that or show that rolling over. And at this point, because the budget is based on drought years, they're not based on hopefully a normal winter, we're going to leave that showing as is in cash.
Joe, can I add some comments on the rates. So as Joe mentioned, we're trying to do a 5-year budget, assuming it's 5 years like this current year, and then modeling how we would adjust if snowfall returns to anything closer to normal. And in that context, we can't. We run out of property tax if we lower the electric rates any more aggressively than that, and so we backed it off there, disappointingly. But it's the reality that electricity is very dependent on snow, and so if we don't have it, we just can't do that adjustment. So that's one major change. The other thing I think we really have to look at is a base rate can be thought of as subsidized, as the small customers subsidizing the large ones. Because if you look at the consumption, it's heavily weighted toward the large ones. If you look at the base rate, it's heavily rated toward volume. And so having cost of living increases for base rate just increasingly shifts a burden, could be thought of. It may not be true, but it might be true. We thought of as shifting the burden from large customers to small customers. And it may not make sense to have the base rate. Changes that. The other thing I think we have to look at is, let's say the cost of owning a home and being as efficient as possible is really high here because the base rate can dominate all of your costs. And is that really what we want? Is that really the model that we want to have? And I think it leads to kind of a bigger picture, which Jill and I want to model before we finish the budget, which is saying that right now we have a very expensive infrastructure because it's designed to handle build-out. And it has a lot of redundancy that we've just learned to appreciate. So that says that the base rates, the rates that's shown on this chart, say in a bad snow year, all of our operating costs are covered. And if you sell 1 extra kilowatt hour or 1 more cubic foot of water, it doesn't cost us any more in infrastructure. It's only the actual production cost, which in the case of electricity is, let's just call it 8 cents, and we sell it for 67 cents. In the case of water, right, it's the cost of pumping and the rest. So it's small compared to the value behind it. And so part of the idea here is to figure out if snows increase, then how much cash does that generate, and then how would we want to apply that, and to have an actual model for thinking about this. And so a lot of these changes, in my mind, are unfortunate but reality. And we may want to look at the propane rates sooner rather than later, because at low snow years, the propane rates, as we mentioned last meeting, don't cover the operating costs.
So a couple of questions. One, that's a propane real rate increase. That's not the that's not just a consequence of propane costs assumed going up. Okay.
It is still assuming the cost for propane at 5.5 cents, which has been lower.
Right, and
but
that's
the fuel adjustment charge nets that out.
Right. Okay, and that's not for 16. That's in 17, and you still are showing electricity rate decrease of 1 cent a year, except for 2020. That must be an anomaly.
I think it was my thought the goal was to get it down to 65 cents,
Okay.
so we just left it at that.
And your base rate increase, is that inflation, or is it something more?
It's right now it's using a
2%.
1%
Oh,
CPI
1%.
projection.
I think those are sensible refinements in the rate assumptions given the cards we've been dealt at this point. And if this is not the new normal, we can revisit it.
And that would be the idea, is to have a way of being able to sort of model that and then saying, how would you adjust? Because at the end, in 2020, we'll be behind on maintenance. It isn't like we're taking, this isn't like we've taken the luxury items and put them off. We've taken fairly essential items that increase our resiliency and reliability and push them off. Just dealing with the realities of what we've got.
So I think that this discussion would be great to have in a study session.
Yeah, with some modeling data.
So that others can hear it and ask questions and so on, because this gets to the heart of things.
Yeah.
And so with that, can I formally request that we have this study session hoping on Friday, June 12th? I know Friday, June 12th could get real busy because of possibly a TriTac meeting in the morning. But I do think this is important. I think it'd be great to have the discussion before the board meeting so that we can respond during the board meeting. And it may mean that the budget is adopted in July rather than in June, but that wouldn't be the end of the world. So that's my request.
I think particularly if we did it in the afternoon, then we could avoid having to possibly reschedule it if there is a TriTac meeting.
Yeah, no, I was thinking, later afternoon.
Yeah.
4 o'clock, something
I
like that.
would, I would encourage us to do that as well. So I think one of the problems that I'm starting to realize is we have lots of data, but not very much modeling, and it's easier to understand a model than the data, particularly because a lot of our data has to be presented in a certain way for reasons that aren't, that just because of Russ or other things, and so it obscures a lot of the concepts that we're trying to work towards.
That's probably not just Russ, it's probably the way the accounting rules are.
Yeah, that's right. It's not. Yeah, I don't want to single out Russ or anything because they've been great.
Right.
But yeah, that and then there's so if we had a conceptual model by the time of that meeting of how we operate and what we're trying to do, and then can compare the conceptual model to our performance, that might provide more insight and understanding than trying to reverse engineer it from the detail back up.
Is there a time on the 12th that would make sense? I know there's a personnel committee meeting at 4, which could be changed.
Yeah, I was thinking 4 o'clock, and I don't think it's, I don't think we should. I don't think it has to go on any more than an hour and a half to 2 hours.
Why don't we make it 3?
3 o'clock or 3 hours?
3 o'clock. Depends on the
I'm
model.
very sensitive to units.
Is that okay with you and staff?
Staff's fine with it. Would you like to move personnel at the same time, to rather earlier or later?
2 o'clock?
2 o'clock is fine.
Okay.
Can I make one request?
Sure.
I think this is all great, but if the board has any issues with any of the assumptions that are seen currently, if I could get those questions or issues before, so I can have a more final.
I was going to mention that. I've got a handful. I was going to email them, so you've got those. I will just say I do think that on page 34, there's a formula error.
That was brought up at finance.
Okay,
so
you've already caught that.
Yeah.
Yeah. 'Cause when I first looked at it, I said, "Wow." Well, there's a formula error under September 30th, and then there's where is it? It's for 2020, 2018, 2020, 2019, 2020. Yeah, the whole total funds line is blank, and it makes our total current assets look extremely anemic. Someone looking at that would say, "Wow,
Yep.
We are going bankrupt."
I didn't see that one.
But there's a whole line of several
yes.
$1 million missing.
Where is that, Eric?
It's on page 36.
Right.
Under current assets, the total fund sum is blank.
Oh, right, yeah.
So the total current assets doesn't include that sum.
Right.
And then I was just, one quick assumption question, just because there's an assumption of $1.6 million of capital
That-
for out valley upgrades, and I don't know what that's about. It's
That
not-
needs to be, that was also brought up at finance, that
Okay.
needs to be
It's not the
removed.
case.
Not the case, okay.
Yeah.
Just to clarify what that is an allocation for the capacity
Oh.
cost of the out valley line. So, but it's not a true expense, it's already been expensed.
Okay, got it. My other comments, or questions, I'll email.
That's great.
So I do see this meeting as making sure we all understand it, but I think equally importantly that we have a model for how we want to think about the next 5 years, as opposed to fine-tuning any specific numbers in the operating plan for the next 12 months.
Yeah, just so from my point of view, when I look at this, I mean, there's actually only one area where I am wondering about specific numbers, but I'll email that.
Which area?
Well, salaries and wages, as in the later years, go down, which is an amazing thing. I mean, I'm not sure that's even possible, but that's what happens. Actually, the combination of salary and wages and benefits go down over the years rather than staying even or going up with inflation or anything like that. So it's definitely a question about why is that? That was the area. But other than that, there are things I want to understand. This discussion with these rates was really useful,
Mhm.
and I think that others would benefit from that.
I would put those in the assumptions. And your questions, if you could CC Bob and me, that would be
I
great.
absolutely will do that. Yep.
So the goal is for any board questions to be to Jill in the next 7 to 14 days.
That's great.
Any other questions from the board or the audience on 8C, which is budget planning? Let's move on to 8D, discussion and possible act. Thank you. Thank you, Jill.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Joe, thanks for a great job on this.
Yeah, making a lot of progress. Discussion and possible action regarding the final issues and ongoing maintenance associated with the Out Valley Power Line project. Manager Sharp. And welcome Michelle Gamble from RCI.
You know, Stanish, I'm remiss in not making one other comment, if I just indulge me for a second. I mean, if we back up several years, it was kind of the practice to close the financial year and then build the budget partway into the year. And this is the first time we're at the point where we actually have a model for 5 years and a pretty solid budget, subject to more review, that's ready for approval well before the start of the year. So I think our understanding, our ability to sort of grasp what we're doing has really improved a lot. And a lot of that's credit goes to Joe and Michael and the staff.
And starting early. Thank you.
And often.
Starting early and often, right?
I'm sorry. So.
And thank you, Eric, for forming all these committees so we get to take a couple shots at this.
It's my pleasure to introduce Michelle once again. She hasn't been here for a lot, but now we're on the closeout phase, so I'm going to turn the ball over to her and let her give us an update.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here and see everybody. I'm going to take all the months that I've missed and combine them in today's report, so we should be done by noon. So, no. Just bringing a little levity into it after that last agenda item. No, we can appreciate that. We are still working on closing out the project, but what I'm really pleased today to let you know that we have two of the 3 outstanding contracts that we're able to close out. We are finishing up the record drawings. I talked with Exponential on Thursday, and they've been finishing up their review. What Dave told us on Thursday was that we'll have all of those drawings within the next week. And what we have to do with those drawings is we have to submit copies of them, pertinent drawings to PG&E, to Caltrans, to Amador County, and then of course here for the district to have as part of your records. So that item is almost complete. We received all of the lien releases from all of the contractors, so everything from both of Wilson's contracts and from Q&D. That was kind of a laborious effort to get all of those and get all of those correctly, but we have all of that. The stormwater pollution prevention plan, that's one of the items that we had hoped to be able to close out, but we'll talk a little bit more about one of the issues that we've noted. We can't close that item out until we can affirmatively say that all of the disturbed areas have been reached a level of stabilization. The goal right now is to be able to do that by June 30th of this year. And so right now we're on track to do that. We have closed out, excuse me, most of the other permits. We have some ongoing maintenance and reporting that has to happen dealing with the Cal Fish and Wildlife and with the Forest Service. We have a meeting set up with the Forest Service for our annual operations meeting on June 11th, and that's required with the ongoing special use permit. And there's numerous items that we have to look at, including noxious weeds that we identified prior to the start of the construction, seeing how those have hopefully not spread through all the measures that we took during the project. Looking at some of the sensitive plant occurrences that we worked around in the project, and then looking at just the stabilization of the corridor, everything that we disturbed for the construction of the project. We have our final contract paperwork that I'll go into in a little bit more detail on one of the other agenda items. And then our notice of completion. So once that final paperwork has been reviewed and approved by the district, then the final notices of completions will be filed with Amador County. Next item. Oh, so what we've noticed, we've been fortunate because this was a 2-year construction period. What we noticed this year is we had some very intense rainstorms. We didn't have a lot of precipitation, and a lot of what came was in the form of rain. These were some areas. These areas were actually constructed in 2013, but what we've noticed this year with that more of a short duration, high intensity rain events that we had, is that we ended up with some erosion along the trench corridor. We didn't see this type of erosion last year, which we would have expected to see after the first year of construction. So I've been out on site with the district. We've looked at these areas, and the district has already gone back and done a remedy on these areas. So all this erosion that we've seen has been put back so that everything is put back to a stable condition. I'm working with the district right now. We've gone out and we've preliminarily identified some areas to put in some additional rolling dips or water bars. These are on areas that are not Forest Service roads, so there's not, the only traffic that we see on these roads is district traffic. So what we're looking at doing is putting in some more shallow water, essentially a water bar that you'd see on a Forest Service road. So we can take some of the water. What's happening is there's a rock slope adjacent to this road, and it appears that water's just hitting that rock slope and then hitting the road, and then it follows the path of least resistance, which is down the road. And we have these disturbed areas. This is an area where we'd actually cut into rock to put the power line trench in, and so we can't backfill with rock. So we have some vulnerable areas there. But we feel pretty confident that by putting in these water bars, which is it's more of a labor-intensive effort, but it's not an expensive effort to do, that we'll be able to remedy this. And this is part of the ongoing maintenance with the Forest Service that we'll be looking at this, on an annual basis.
Just to elaborate, the district has received and distributed over 50 ton of base rock in these areas that you're looking at now. So that's already been done, and if we went out there today, the areas would look much more like a Forest Service road than this. That might give you a little bit more concern. So this issue has already been resolved.
And there was no damage to the power line associated with any of this. That was looked at as well. So it was just all the sediment ended up being down in the flat spot of the road. So we've got it remedied.
Would you characterize it as within what you would expect, or outside of what you would expect for a project of this nature?
This is not unusual. I think what based on the rain event that we had, I did not expect to see this amount of erosion in this area, especially since it had been through a winter already where we had rain events. So I was a little surprised at the severity of the erosion in this area. And again, that's why we're looking at doing these remedies. It's not something I would have, when we were constructing the project, it's not something that jumped out at me as, wow, we really need to address this as a part of the design. So it was I guess I'd call it unusual.
Okay.
As a part of our other ongoing maintenance, we will be looking at the overhead and the substations as well. Do you want me to go ahead and do the closeout paperwork? So what you have before you is we actually have the final paperwork to close out the overhead and substation portion of the project. I'll go ahead and I'll start with the overhead portion of the project. What you have is a letter from me indicating that all of the contractual obligations of Wilson Utility Construction Company have been fulfilled. They have completed their certification of the project. The engineer of record, Exponential Engineering, has also provided their certification of the project. So we have various forms that are required by Russ that have to be completed both by the engineer of record and by the contractor, including all the lien releases. And we have looked at all of the lien releases and verified that they are as appropriate. And so with that, we have all of the forms, the Form 187, the Russ Form 213, and the Russ Form 231 have been signed and completed. And we have submitted to the district the paperwork for the final release of the retention that we've withheld on all of the project. And so I am recommending that that retention be released, and that the district file this paperwork and complete the notice of completion for the overhead project.
So to be clear, what staff is recommending, and staff recommends approval of the following motions. The first motion would be a motion for approval of the certificate of completion, which shows on your packet as page 57. It is Russ Form 187. And a motion to approve and to authorize the president to sign as indicated on page 58. And this is the Russ Form 187 that we have to file with Russ.
Any questions, comments from the board or the audience?
I'd like to move approval of this notice of completion as described by our general manager.
I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously.
Rick, you're getting thank you. The second motion that the district recommends is a motion to approve the notice of completion. This actually is a notice that is recorded. It appears on page 59 in your packet. And this would be notarized by Joe Campbell is here. This would be signed by President O'Grady as well. And this is recorded in the county, which would be handled.
And so you're a notary public? Okay.
So what we will do is have President O'Grady sign that in front of Sandy McKay.
When will that happen?
When needed, we'll make sure that happens.
Okay.
So we need a motion for,
Approval of the notice of completion.
okay, I move that we approve the notice of completion included in the packet on page 59.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
And staff recommends finally the final 5% retention payment to Wilson Utility Construction Company as detailed on page 61 in your packet, and as agendized in the amount of $467,802.46.
Any questions or comments from the board or the audience?
Can you explain how this relates to the rework they're going to need to do? For the sealing the conduits and Or is
That's
that?
not Wilson.
That's underground?
I'll
So-
talk.
Okay, all right.
So no, that's a very good point, that the fiber, that's one of the reasons we can't bring underground to the board today. We're only bringing overhead and substation,
Okay.
which both of those don't have any outstanding issues. But that's a good question.
All right.
So I'd like to move that we approve payment of the 5% retention to Wilson Construction for completion of this project.
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'll continue, the next would be the substations, and
187 for substations.
on page 62 in your packet is the Rust Form 187. And staff recommends approval of the certificate of completion, Rust Form 187, as shown in your packet.
Any questions or comments? I'll make a motion that we approve for Russ Form 187 for the substations.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
And next, staff recommends approval of notice of completion, as indicated on your packets on page 64 to be recorded at Amador County.
Any questions or comments?
So move.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Finally, staff recommends approval of the final 5% retention fee to Wilson Utility Construction, as agendized in the amount of $119,028.07, as shown in your packet on page 66.
Any discussion? I'll move that we approve that final retention payment.
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
So those 6 pass unanimously. And so that's the closeout of the substation and the overhead.
So those projects
All
are
done.
closed out. We do have in the contract, there is a 1-year warranty period. So if there are items that do arise that are due to defective material that was not owner furnished or due to workmanship issues, they are contractually obligated to come in and repair. However, the contracts are set up so that you do release the retention once these other milestones are reached, assuming that there aren't going to be any issues with the project. And I have no reason to think that we would have any issue with Wilson if we did end up having a workmanship or a warranty item.
And the warranty starts as of the signature or as of some earlier date? Or?
That would have started as of the date of completion of each one of the projects. We had, I believe it was a November 1st completion of the
Yeah,
overhead
okay.
and a December
So when we started
9th.
using them.
Correct.
And that means that from an accounting perspective, we get the work in progress, at least for these portions, completed. Great. And when would you expect to complete the underground?
On the underground, we
Or are you
have...
going to give us an update?
Yeah, we have a couple items that came to light over the winter. The first had to do with the loss of the fiber optic line. Over the winter, as you're well aware, our fiber line went down. The district brought out Edge Communications, and they were able to determine that there was ice in the conduit near Silver Lake Bridge. And so they didn't pull the conduit out because we want to be able to pull that conduit out and not damage it, so we can kind of do some forensics on it and make sure that we do understand what caused the cable to break. So they put in new fiber line in the spare conduit that we had. In going through what happened, it came to light that there were, the spare conduits were not sealed per the contract documents and specifications. So we've been working with Exponential regarding what needed to be done, what should have been done during inspections, and the actual construction of the project. Q&D, we had a meeting with Q&D and Titan and Edge and Exponential in the district to discuss the remedy for this. And we're looking at having that scheduled the week of June 8th. And they will come out at no cost to the district to do those repair items, including pulling the conduit that was broken, and we'll look at it and, like I said, do the forensics on it, make sure that we can determine that it was due to ice in the conduit that caused it to break. That's one of the areas where the conduit goes over Silver Lake Bridge, and so it appears that water got into the conduit. There's a lot of groundwater in the area, and everything on the system is designed to be able to withstand wet conditions. But in this one particular area, we ended up having freeze-thaw because this is in an above-ground conduit that goes across the bridge. And right now, that's what we're thinking happened, is that due to that freeze-thaw in the conduit around the cable, that's what ended up breaking the cable. But again, we want to pull that out. We want to be able to look at it and make sure that that was the case and it wasn't, something else that we haven't thought of at this point.
I'm sorry, 2 clarification questions. One, you said the spare conduit wasn't sealed. Did you mean the primary conduit?
I'm sorry, the primary and the spare conduit. The spare conduits need to be sealed as well.
And the second?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Exactly. So we have the conduit and we have the fiber cable, so the annular spacer around this needs to be sealed, and then the spare conduits as well, those need to be sealed.
And the second question is, just the fiber line broke, not the conduit?
Correct. That's what
we think.
That's what we think at this point. Correct.
So one other question, during the repair, we obviously don't have any communications working, or do we have any downtime to deal with?
Sure. So we're looking at the repair to be during the June 8th through 11th. And during that time, we will take an outage and actually run the powerhouse during that period. And during this period, we'll actually open up all the vaults, drop pumps down as needed into the electrical vaults and pump them out, and make a field determination on whether they need to be sealed in those areas as well. So we'll have a communication outage and a power line outage for a period of 2 to 3 days, depending on how long this work takes.
And are they covering our added costs, or are we just eating that?
At this point, we have not addressed that. They're completing all of the repairs, but we haven't addressed the added cost with power outage.
I just want to point out that that's the reason we called for the operations committee meeting to be during that outage, so that it'll be 4 for 4.
Yeah, makes sense.
Also, we have to do some necessary usage on the in-valley line. But isn't that correct, Brandy?
Right, it's a wonderful opportunity.
Necessary what, Peter? I missed that.
Brandy, could you maybe explain to Standish what we need to do?
We have to run the generators under load for a period of hours so that the diesel particulate filters can recharge.
Great.
This would be a good time to check our redundancy, the operation of all of our generators, and kind of shoot out clear out the bugs out of all of our systems to make sure that they work as well as they did Thursday.
I'll eliminate.
Lots of lemonade.
We've also been working with Caltrans. As you're aware, Caltrans came to the district over the winter and, I'm sorry. Can we do station service and then I'll do Caltrans? The backup station service for the KM Green substation. This was the portion of the project where we had a significant amount of coordination with PG&E that didn't go quite as smoothly as the rest of the coordination of PG&E. So, so anyway, I digress.
Watching the Jon Stewart show.
So we have finally, I'm here to tell you that we finally have the backup station service at KM Green complete, and the meter has been set, and it has been tested, and there are the PG&E standard bollards. So if you're up there, they're in sleeves as PG&E required. If you're up there, please don't hit the transformer. Hopefully these bollards will stop you. So
These were all installed by district staff, by the way. And, we're very proud of these bollards.
They all look right.
they are to PG&E standards to the letter. So But that is done and that is complete. We're in the process right now of reconciling all the costs associated with the backup station service. And so lastly, we, as I was starting to say, Caltrans came to the district over the winter and brought up a concern they had about water surfacing along sections of Highway 88 and creating some iced conditions. We met with Caltrans and we actually performed some emergency work out there to cut through the slurry trench that was required by Caltrans as a part of the project design to relieve the groundwater pressure or the groundwater that was being essentially flowing up against our slurry trench and then finding a spot in the concrete to surface. We resolved that in the field with Caltrans to the level that they wanted it done, and then they came back and said they wanted us to do more work because they had more water surfacing in the same area. So we've been coordinating with them regarding the extent of the work that they would like to have done. They provided me that information about 2 weeks ago, and I forwarded it to Q&D, and we're waiting to get a proposal from Q&D. Once we see what those costs are, we'll be going back to Caltrans to discuss how to go about getting this done. This is partially the reason why we can't, or this reason combined with the sealing of the fiber conduits, are the reason we can't close out the underground portion of the project. What we will be recommending is that we release a portion of the retention that we are holding on the underground project. We've talked internally from the team about what amount of money we should withhold from Q&D to deal with the fiber issue, which is covered under their current contract, but we'd like to be able to release that. So we'll be coming back in June with a recommendation to release a portion of that retention, still hold some of it back till the fiber work is done. And then by the June meeting, we should have a determination from Caltrans and proposals from Q&D to go back and do some additional remedy work along the slurry trench section. We are also looking at a potential claim back to Caltrans. We did build this per their design. We did do exactly what they asked us to do, and we are just negotiating with them. We feel that this burden shouldn't fall directly on the district to go back and redesign and rebuild something that was done to the Caltrans details.
So Q&D contract probably won't be closed out this fiscal year.
We're looking at not being able to close that out until probably July.
Any questions for Michelle or comments from either the board or the audience?
I have one, and it's a recap, but since you weren't here for the last time I asked. This seems an obvious thing that any inspector should have been able to see. I mean, this isn't like some little detail that would be buried and you never notice. I mean, it's so blatant. How did this happen? And are there other things that we need to check that we haven't thought of? Because my sense of confidence in certain inspections is obviously questioned.
We have gone back and we've looked, believe me, I have looked at all the inspection reports. What was addressed, what we should have caught, and I will tell the board that RCI paid Q&D for the remedy work that was done. It's cost that the district did not see because I agreed that there was something that should have been caught in the field by our inspectors, and they did not catch it, and I didn't feel that the district should pay for that. There was a French drain, an existing French drain that we found when we were doing construction.
Mm-hmm.
The repair that was done and how it was handled in the field I felt was not to the standard that it should have been, and we just took care of that. The balance of this, when we look at what we encountered when we were excavating the trench, there was no indication that this was an area that flowed water from that French drain down gradient. There was no indication, there were no French drains that were installed. There were no gravel bedding material. There was nothing that gave us an indication that there was a subsurface flow laterally across the road that we needed to account for. When we did encounter the French drain, we did have the Caltrans inspector on site as well, and we proceeded with their approval to continue with the slurry. So I hope what I'm saying tells you that, yes, we saw an issue with our inspection and we handled it, but everything else, there was nothing. If I had been the inspector out there, there was nothing in this lower portion that would have led me to think that we needed to do something differently.
That's a great answer to the question I didn't ask.
Oh, I apologize.
But that's
I'm
okay.
sorry, was that?
I was actually.
Okay.
You're talking about the
I'm
fiber,
glad
aren't you?
I was
Oh.
actually asking about the fiber.
Oh,
But
I
do
apologize.
appreciate-
I'm on Caltrans.
I do appreciate what you said and your attention to detail in the follow-up.
On the fiber, yes, it is something that the sealing of the fiber conduits should have been caught during inspection, and we've had numerous conversations with Exponential about, they inspected those portions of that. My inspectors did not do anything related to the cabinets or the vaults.
Yeah.
And I would have to defer to Michael. There have been conversations that I have not been involved with regarding that, I guess. But they are aware that that's something that their inspectors may have missed in the field.
Okay.
So isn't the question you're asking about what other things might they have missed besides
Yeah.
the ceiling? And have we looked at those things to make sure that we're happy that those got done right and the inspections were done properly to verify that they were done right? By specifically the guys that were in charge of doing the sealing of the conduit.
Right. And I will say that since this happened, there has been a tremendous amount of scrutiny at all of these vaults and all of these cabinets, looking at what has happened. So I'm confident now that when the sealing issue is taken care of, what we've identified are this groundwater issue is of a magnitude that we are looking to how we can modify these. That's not part of the contract, wasn't part of the original design, but how can we modify these to minimize the amount of water intrusion? The conduits and the cable were all designed so that, assuming that we are going to have groundwater and they can convey it, the amount of groundwater that we're seeing in the vaults is significantly more than what was anticipated, to such a level that we would like to either put potentially some weep holes, if we can put it in an area where we think we're not going to bring more water into the vault, that we could actually drain it. And looking at some other things. But I think with the amount of scrutiny, that the sealing of the conduits is a minor item that was missed, but I don't see any other items out there that give me cause for alarm.
All right, that was my question, so.
Okay, I apologize, I was
No,
still on
it's okay.
Caltrans.
Great, thank you. So item number 4, do you need a motion? Have we covered that yet?
The slurry, so item number 4 and 5 were in anticipation that we would have received, and staff and consultants had approved a repair scheme for any remaining issues. We have not received that, nor has staff reviewed it. So I just wanted Michelle to give an update on the slurry issue. At this point, we're not looking for any approval on that.
Great. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, it was good to see you.
Likewise. So moving on to 8E, continued discussion and possible action regarding the current outvalue cost estimate. Manager Michael Sharp.
Yeah, with item E, I'd like to address the cost of ownership issue under the item F, interconnection. At this point, our overall project cost, which was sent out as a supplemental, have not changed from the last meeting, and our expense breakdown remains stable as they appeared at the last meeting. The items that aren't included here is any true-up costs that we'll have with PG&E. We're still working with PG&E, and any additional costs for, per se, the fiber, not the fiber, but the slurry project that we just discussed. So at this point, our out-value costs are stable from what we showed last year. Our remaining risks are the PG&E true-up of the remaining costs, which we should be able to present at the next meeting. We are working on several issues with PG&E, which I'll address in the next agenda topic. The other issue on this agenda topic is the useful life. We're still waiting on a determination letter from Russ on the lowering of the powerhouse depreciation. Russ has had their meeting and made their depreciation. We're waiting on that written confirmation. The budget is based on a reduction from 7% to 3.5%. And we have discussed that with the Finance Committee.
We don't know what their decision is, though.
We know verbally, we know what we think it's going to be, but we don't know exactly what it is until we
So
see.
the 3.5% is safe?
Yes, sir.
A safe assumption.
Do you know when would you estimate knowing that in writing?
Well, I estimated that we'd receive it in April, but now it's May, so
You're sticking with May?
I'm sticking with May.
You got 21 days.
We don't want to push too hard for the determination. It is retroactive to the time of November 1st.
Sure.
And we do need these people potentially for the next agenda topic.
Any questions from the board or audience? Why don't you keep rolling, Michael?
We're working with PG&E on several issues. Response to the district's request for information on the substation cost of ownership. What was existing between Salt Springs and Tiger Creek, the top line. What was installed during the installation, which would be the lines that go down to KM Green. What improvements were made to make the maintenance, this maintenance determination. We did receive a diagram that's in your packet on page 80, and I discussed it at length with Marty Hunt, and we both decided that we needed our technical teams to discuss it because there's just a lot of questions that need to be answered so that we can make that maintenance determination. So we're going to have Dave Wrightley, myself, and then Marty, and then technical people from PG&E meet to kind of answer those questions on a technical nature so we can determine that if upgrades were made to Tiger Creek and Salt Springs that were part of the project and part of the protection scheme between the two, that PG&E would have a responsibility for some of the maintenance costs there. The second issue that we're talking about is we have requested a meeting with PG&E to discuss the evaluation of the risks and benefits of the switch station project with board members to be present. And we pretty much determined that Marty Hunt isn't the right individual, that we need to go through their administration, which is Mike Tannenbaum and his boss, Dave Rubin. So we're looking to have a meeting with them and members of the board to discuss questions, including the maintenance of the 115 line in the future. So that meeting should happen, we're hoping for in May.
Why is Marty not the right guy, number one? And number two, do you think it's realistic to schedule a meeting, with PG&E in May? Just given the lead time.
I don't know the answer to the second part. We'll certainly try, and we'll see what their schedules. Marty Hunt is a project supervisor. He's a senior project supervisor. He deals with the district. His other client is the high-speed rail project, so projects is his business. Administration is more in tune with these long-term contracts, and Mike Tannenbaum is our contact for administration. So Marty felt that our best course of action is to deal through the administration chain, and that's the advice that we've gotten from PG&E.
My concern is that administration, they're contract kinds of people. I mean, I've met them a number of times, and I wonder whether they're decision makers. Do you think they're decision makers?
Who David Rubin is, Marty Hunt will also be at this meeting with board members. So.
Okay.
But are they able to evaluate the risk and benefit, et cetera, In other words, if we don't build the substation, we keep the scheme we have today, are they able to evaluate the risk, if any, to PG&E as sort of the contracts people?
Yeah, I don't know. I know how I've been advised by PG&E on which way to go. I mean, we certainly could go back to requesting a meeting with Greg Lemler and John Parks, who we've done in the past, but that's a level above.
I see the purpose of the meeting a little bit differently. I want them to convince me why it's in the best interest of our ratepayers to spend $2 million. And if they can't do that very well, then I'm building a body of evidence to take higher up, as opposed to this is a decision meeting.
Okay. And do you think that they
Do you
care?
agree with that, Mike?
Yeah, I think just.
Do you think they care? I guess. I mean, which will help you build your body of evidence, I guess, but they've not indicated that they care about these things in the past.
Getting them to care it might be a different strategy, but first we have to get the data. If they can't explain if they can't explain any benefit to our ratepayers of spending $2 million,
2.7 million.
or even 2.7 million, that's an important thing to find out. If they can explain it, then that's a different state. But I think that's the logical next step. Don't ask me too many steps after that, because I'm not ready.
No.
As the board has seen before, this is the switch station project schedule, which shows a completion in October of 2018. We have discussed the concept of moving this quicker, but due to concerns with having to redo work, we have slowed down the process until we can thoroughly review the system impact study. This is the current budget, which as mentioned, is at 2.7. We actually have not value engineered or looked at this until we've considered our discussions with PG&E. The preliminary system impact study has been received and will be distributed to the board shortly. The system impact study is a general feasibility study of the project, and should be complete by May 26th as per the schedule. So we're going to be in the middle of reviewing this. Once complete, if the report is favorable, a facility study would be initiated at a cost of $125,000. This would be initiated and gives more specific information on the exact equipment to be used and probable cost. Should the board decide to proceed with researching a RUS loan to pay the cost for the project, the first step is to determine if the system impact study has sufficient information for an electrical engineer to complete a construction work plan. If the system impact study has enough information so that an electrical engineer can do the construction work plan, then we could proceed in that direction. But it very well could be the case that we need the facilities study to actually have the details in order to complete the construction work plan. Once the construction work plan is completed, then an environmental study based on that construction work plan begins. The environmental study looks at the environmental impacts of the construction work plan. Once it's done, or during the same time, a financial forecast would have to be updated using the load forecast that we're using today. Those are the three parts of an application packet for a C8 loan: a construction work plan, an engineering report, and a financial forecast. Those three would be submitted to RUS for possible approval. Once they approve it, then we put the team together to do the loan documents. Once that process is done, then they actually fund the loan. So I think it was important to go through the process that we had done twice before with receiving a RUS loan if the board decides to take any of these steps in the future. But that is the road that we're going through. So is there any questions on the extent of the environmental is unknown? It could be a letter to the file, it could be a neg deck, it could be an impact study. It's an unknown until we take a look at the construction work plan. Given the time of the year, it's basically impossible that any of this could be accomplished before the end of the federal fiscal year, which is September 30th, 2015. So we're probably looking at next year.
When do we have to make the decision on the feasibility study and commit to the $130,000?
The 125 facilities. Well, first we need to finalize the system impact study, and then we have to study it enough. I would say that that's probably a decision July, Michelle?
Yeah.
At the very earliest.
And is PG you need the required contractor to do that work, or can we bid that design?
The work at the switch.
125,000, yeah.
Oh no, that's their study. It's facility study would be PG.
What benefit do we receive from that?
We get a detailed look at what the project's equipment would be and the impacts that it would have to their system.
It's a PG&E requirement. If we are going to move forward with moving the switch station, it has to be done. The 125,000, we're trying to be very conservative in the costs that we anticipate for the study. Again, with our track record with them,
Yeah.
this is a significantly much smaller project than what we did with the Out Valley. So reasonably, we think that the cost would be less, but I'm not willing
Yeah.
to.
Particularly since it's just duplicating what we have
Correct.
in a different location.
Yeah, that's why I think maybe Eric could do it for
Yeah, I
us.
was going to say, yeah. Just take his copy machine and
Move the location on the
I'll
map.
take those nice diagrams,
Yeah, okay, thanks.
And in our budget, we've assumed no CA loan. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So we've assumed expensing this switch station through normal operations and rates.
Right. The Finance Committee has asked the staff to pursue a C8 loan, just in the possibility that the board has that flexibility of moving in that direction, just in case.
So the cash projection that we looked at earlier includes that we're paying for this in that time frame?
Correct.
Is that right?
It includes until the current reserve fund is,
it falls
drained.
$1.2 million short. So we don't and won't have the cash to do this without a loan. As of what we know.
Assuming 5 years of drought.
Yeah, assuming 5 years of drought.
Right. I think a loan would be a requirement, assuming this year's normal.
I just reiterate what I think everybody feels is we have to do everything we can to avoid this project. The project has no functional benefit to anybody. And I've queried that again in detail with Michael. He sent me information that Dave Rightly provided. There is no functional reason to do it.
True. Period.
So.
Is it possible that trying to apply for a Russ loan would get us any additional leverage against PG&E on this topic? I mean, if Russ said, as we are saying, that there is no benefit to it and that they're reluctant to fund it and so on, is that a possible advantage we could be bringing to bear?
I think understanding where our leverage is and isn't is something we haven't really done yet. I sort of wanted to hear their argument of why it's good for us. Yeah, first. Forgive me for being serial-minded on that, but you're asking a question I just don't know.
You know, there are a whole bunch of bad things that happen if we don't comply with this in the current contract.
Yeah.
And how long could we delay the feasibility study reasonably and keep momentum?
I think you just said the right words. you have to keep momentum. So if there's justifiable ways that we have questions with the system impact study, if we're looking at financing, if there's things that we're doing but we're making progress, kind of sounds like the water rights progress on the, as long as you're making progress and we're trying to meet milestones, but the facility study takes a extraordinarily long time to complete. So that's going to be it's a lot of money. It's $125,000, and it's, I think, it's an 8-month process of PG&E doing this study. So the real delay would be if the board decided to do the facility study, there is a long period of time until we would have to start doing our construction work plan or any of our design. Because I couldn't recommend the board doing any engineering design or environmental until the facilities plan is done, so we don't have that issue of redoing work because they changed their mind midstream and wanted to move the switch station 30 feet or make it bigger. These would have significant impacts to our design.
Okay. So a few months.
Yes, sir.
And Eric, your point is we would exhaust the reserve fund, but I think all the cash for this project in the current budget comes out of here. Are you saying we're $1.2 million short?
I'm pretty sure that I read
Yes.
that we're $1.2 million short.
We're $1.2 million short of the 2.7, which has not been valued engineered.
So where's the 1.2 in this budget?
It isn't. It's short. It's not showing as a negative. It's just.
You remember a year ago, we were assuming that the cash from operations and electricity, we would either pay down one of the loans coming due, or we would use it to pay for this work. And so now that we've taken that out, it's just a hole.
Mm-hmm. So Jill, I was asking the question when you were out of the room. This exhausts all our reserve, this switch station project. And I think what's being discussed is that we are essentially only expensing a $1.5 million switch station. In other words, Michael and Eric say there's $1.2 million that's not accounted for in the income statement. We better put that on the footnote.
It's in the assumptions.
Yeah. Is that in the assumptions? I didn't see it. Okay. Pardon me. Any other questions on PG&E or anything else you want to cover, Michael?
Nope, that's it.
Great. Moving on to 8G. Discussion and possible action related to the district's research and efforts to improve the efficiencies and minimize the losses of each department as measured in performance reporting. Electric and propane manager Brandy Benson. Welcome.
Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, Michelle.
So we'll start with electric department first this morning. Our total production of kilowatt hours for the month was 579,000 kilowatt hours with a metered total of 464,000. So that shows a total system loss of 115,000 kilowatt hours for a 19.9% total system loss, with our goal being 12%. I would like to note that 19.9% is a higher percentage loss this month, but that is due to less production this month. The 115,000 kilowatt hours that were lost is actually a smaller number than last month, and this total has served to reduce our total system losses for the year slightly. We have action items for electric. We have made some changes to our meter list on the billing system, which is just knowing which of the meters in the valley belongs to which feeder from the powerhouse. We've done that, and we are going to continue working to update that list. We have moved the powerhouse usage from the system loss category into an actual metered total. So if you look at the performance report format in your packet, you'll see a note that we are now putting our powerhouse usage into our actual metered total, so it will not be listed as a loss. And we are going to continue to work with Dave Riley and Exponential to investigate any additional potential cost savings we can find at the powerhouse. I would like to also make a quick note in the electric category on harmonics. We are continuing to work with Exponential on the analysis of the chairlift data, and we were directed by the Capital and Operations Committee meeting to give a timeline to Exponential on completing that, and Michael is going to be following up with Dave Riley on that. Are there any questions on the electric portion?
Can you just remind me on the system losses, which of those are the remainder of the loss and which of those are actually measured?
Blue and green are engineers' estimates, as well as the step-up transformers. The distribution system losses are actual measured,
Right.
and the out valley loss is just the remainder.
Okay, and then we've revised where we think some of the meters are with regards to which circuit. That's
Yeah.
already been updated.
Yes. Okay. Moving on to propane. We have,
Actually, before you do you think the 12% is achievable? Or do you think, what do you think is achievable, or don't you really know at this point?
I think we're still evaluating at this point. I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Moving on to propane, we have an actual metered this month of 1.4 million cubic feet with a usage of approximately 1.4 cubic feet. There was a slight...
Is there a chart for that?
So there was a slight negative unmetered total. This is just an inventory adjustment. We've talked about in the past how propane reacts to temperature and our metering system. So we are pretty on track for propane for the month. Our unmetered total for the year is 3%. If we move on to water.
I have one
Oh,
propane
sorry.
question.
Mhm.
I asked it last month, but I can't remember the answer. Is there a way to change our meters so they're more fine granularity?
We've looked in the past at additional metering at our tanks.
No, I meant for the home use.
Oh, I'm sorry, I have not got an answer for you on that, but I will come back to you on
To
that.
change from 100 cubic feet, is that what you're?
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's a really, if there's a propane leak, it takes a long time for it to accumulate. Whereas a water leak, as you know, we find out an hour later. And if I remember right, you said we have to replace a certain number. There's a requirement.
10%.
So
Correct.
there's an opportunity to try to improve it if we can. All right.
Correct.
All right. So I didn't. Okay.
Okay.
And I think that changing just the register would actually allow us to change the multiplier on, from 100 to 10, rather than the entire meter.
Right.
Which would be much less expensive.
Right.
Okay. Moving on to water. This month we had a total production of 733,000 gallons with an actual metered of 657,000. Our losses this month were about 76,000, which is 10%. This is lower than in past months. We show here in our identified system losses category a 12,000 gallon district facility use. That is still an estimate. And our main action item on water is to investigate installing water meters on district facilities and see what the economic feasibility of doing that is. Are there any questions on water?
Do we charge ourselves for our water use?
We do an estimated allocation.
Lastly, we have wastewater. In wastewater, our influent metered, which is the amount of water coming into the plant is 1.7 million, and our actual metered is from our water total in the valley. We had 647,000 gallons. So this shows a total system loss, which we will in future iterations start calling unmetered. Unmetered total of 1 million gallons, which is a 62% unmetered total. This is infiltration season, which we talked about last time. These numbers are on track with what we recorded and measured last year in the infiltration season. Both years, we expect we're going to see lower flows in the next month or so as infiltration season ends. And the action item that is most pertinent here is staff has started an inspection program for our manholes for I&I, which is inflow and infiltration. So far they've inspected 19 manholes. They are looking for damage to the collars, to the lids, any debris, anything that would allow extra water to get into the system. They're going to continue this program to inspect the manholes and try to pinpoint areas of highest concern so that we can attempt to do some mitigation measures if possible.
Do we know the incremental, because it means we processed an extra 1 million gallons of wastewater. In all likelihood, that's what that means. Do we know what our incremental cost is to process a gallon? Because that would let us know what that's costing in terms of rate increase rates.
Yeah, we could figure that out because it'd be the variable cost of
Right.
wastewater treatment.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
This logic, of course, applies to all of the efficiency efforts, right?
Yeah, but this is the only one where I don't actually know that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and this is something we talked about ever since we started performance reporting was, how do you assess the cost benefit
Yeah, exactly.
of any potential fix, right?
Right.
If you eliminated the 61%, you couldn't save a penny, we'd stop looking at this chart, right? It didn't cost any more to run the wastewater treatment factory because it had more stuff going through it, be a dead duck from an interest perspective. So.
It definitely does, though.
Okay, so then the question is how much?
Right.
And the factor is also that thicker wastewater is more expensive to treat than thinner wastewater. And that's
Yeah, so this is diluting it.
right. So that's a huge factor. So all wastewater systems
So
have.
if we took out the infiltration, it'd actually be more expensive?
Well, as on a per gallon, oh, most definitely, much more expensive. Remember, we're taking all this effluent, we're sitting it through these little tubes and pushing it out and having to take out the solids of it. If you dilute wastewater, it becomes much cheaper to treat. So.
But there's no reason to think the total cost of processing is lower by adding it.
No, per gallon.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
It makes the effluent colder, the nitrogen bugs don't like that so much. So
Yeah. So this is all great stuff, and I love talking about nitrogen bugs, but the question still remains, and it's an important question, is how much of a savings opportunity does this constitute? Unless we know, it's not a pointless discussion, but it's difficult to see the point.
So we need an estimate.
Generally, you want to. We're above 25%. You want to get below 20%. Isn't that the accepted formula?
I think it's
Yeah,
15.
15,
Yeah, 15%.
For wastewater treatment, of course, most wastewater treatment plants don't have the high cost of electricity that we have. So.
Good point.
So we're 30% for the year, though.
30% of the year. If there are no additional questions, that completes my report.
Any additional questions, comments from the board or the audience? Thank you, Brandy. Item 8H, discussion and possible approval of Resolution 1505 and bill of sale for the Timber Creek Townhomes development accepting the infrastructure improvements. Michael Sharp.
On October 25th of 2013, the board entered into a developer agreement with the Martin Point LLC, a subsidiary of Kirkwood Capital Partners to build a total of 24 townhomes over 3 phases in the new subdivision known as Timber Creek Townhomes. Phase 1 includes a total of 5 units in buildings A and B, of which 2 3-bedroom units in building B are now complete. Phase 1 also includes the infrastructure improvements for buildings A, B, G, and H, or 11 units in total. The final map, which was approved by Amador County Board of Supervisors on April 14th, includes the 5 units in Phase 1 and the infrastructure for the 11 units just mentioned. And it as well includes the infrastructure improvements on Timber Creek Drive and in Driveway B, which services these units. In accordance with the terms of the developer agreement, conditions have been satisfied. The improvements have been completed. They've been inspected by staff and consultants, tested and approved. The connection fees have been paid for a total of $27,728. That's for 2 units. The developer has maintained a credit balance in the developer deposit fund. The district-owned improvements and all the real property interest or easements have been granted. The district has received the final as-built drawings. Our maintenance guarantee has been paid, which amounts to 50% of the cost of the improvements for a 1-year period. That period would start with the signature of the bill of sale, so it hasn't started yet. The final subdivision map was approved by Amador County, and we should be receiving a copy soon. The bill of sale still needs some refinement, but it does specifically mention the material that the developer has installed on the project. The district has provided 2 letters to J.O. Hazard for the real estate interest. The remaining issues left to be done is the successful installation and testing of the transformer that is to serve the units. Developer's cost of works needs to be amended to include the cost of the transformer wire and to verify connection points. The maintenance guarantee needs to be adjusted upwards to include the cost of the transformer and the wire, and to confirm the bill of sale accurately reflects the defined work. Staff recommendation after meeting with the planning committee is that the board approve resolution 1505 based on the general manager's acceptance of the final remaining issues as stated.
I have one question, which is, what has been built on that map? Is it the lot 4 and 5?
What has been built is right here.
Yeah. Okay.
Those are the 2 3-bedrooms that you see up there. The infrastructure, the improvements for 11 units is actually what we're accepting today into the public domain. And we'll accept them only once that the transformer is installed and the final paperwork of the bill of sale. So this kind of meets the developer's needs, but it also meets the staff's needs as far as making sure that the infrastructure is complete before acceptance.
Okay, and so there are another 10 units that are shown up there that are not in color. They would have to do additional infrastructure to develop those units?
No. Actually, the infrastructure for those units have been stubbed out at the appropriate locations. So the district's property ends at the public, where the public lines are. So they have stubbed out. They put in thermocoil boxes. They put in cleanouts to those properties. And then once they, actually build the properties, it'll be the responsibility of the owner or the developer to connect to the district, just like it would be in a single-family home. So when you approve palisades per se, you don't approve anything in the structure. You just improve the infrastructure leading up to the structure so that the owner can connect to that infrastructure.
Are we accepting the infrastructure for just the 11 units, though?
Just the 11 units, not the entire 24. They've only completed the infrastructure to the 11 units.
Okay.
A subsequent bill of sale would have to be done for any other improvements.
That's what I thought. Okay. I think he heard my question as the 11 units, not the other 10. Okay. Any discussion, or I guess you consider this?
Yeah, this is what we thought made sense so that we don't impede possible. And Dave tells me that he has a potential buyer, and rather than delay this acceptance until the next board meeting 30 days out from now, if he can be getting somebody to sign a piece of paper and start consuming electricity, we thought he ought to be able to do that. So he does have to complete the remaining items as Michael described, of course. So this is approving the motion contingent upon completion of those items to general manager's satisfaction.
Any questions from the board or the audience? Good. I'll motion that we approve Resolution 1505 and bill of sale for the Timber Creek Townhomes contingent on general manager deciding that everything has been satisfactorily completed.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Moving on to 8I, discussion and possible approval of Resolution 1504 revising the district's water alert system stage 2 due to the current drought conditions.
As we have reported several times at the board meeting and have discussed extensively in the operations committee, state regulations continue to address the 4-year drought. On the urban front, which urban is defined in the water business as anyone over 3,000 or more users, there is at least 25% reduction, mandatory reduction from 2013. There's up to a 36% reduction for some communities, including South Lake Tahoe. There's information in your packet. This has caused a lot of reaction in the Central Valley. For small waters, we were extremely lucky. We have a either or. We either have to reduce by 25% and show that what we're doing to reduce that, or we have to limit our irrigation usage to 2 times per week, or both if the board so chooses to do so. The regulations also address, so staff has made modifications to the water stage alert. So you'll remember last time we continued the water stage alert in its current form, and the board asked us to come back with a new water stage alert that conformed to the state regulations. So we've done that, and we've put out a new water stage alert to the board. One of the biggest areas, of course, is outdoor irrigation. And we've backed totally away from any time limit on zones. We used to have in the a 45-minute limit, a 30-minute limit. That's not actually what's been done by the state. They're basically limiting the number of days and the hours. And the hours is the big deal because you don't want people watering in the middle of the day. So this, the revision in front of you would limit watering days to 2 times a week, but any days that the customer chooses. And through the report server, we can track when people water, and not only on the days, but also on the time. And Jill will write an alarm if people are watering during the days, which is exactly what we don't want. And as I said, we've backed away from any try to regulate the amount of time during that period that they're watering. Other areas is the washing of impervious surfaces is prohibited. Any runoff down the street is prohibited. Irrigation of non-landscaped natural vegetation or undeveloped projects is prohibited. Washing of vehicles or other equipment is only allowed during the set times and dates. No unattended watering except there's automatic shutoff, and others as detailed in your packet. So this is for approval at the board. I think this is a good step towards showing not only on our public awareness campaign to show that we are complying with state regulations, but I think that these are the same measures that we did last year. And as the board will remember in my previous comments is that because that 2013 we had such a big water year, we will easily, if we enact these the same restrictions as we did last year, easily meet that 25% reduction, and we'll be reducing water usage to 2 times a week as required. So staff recommends approval of the resolution changing the water stage alert system as discussed.
So you backed away from the time limit per zone, but you put back in the days per HOA.
No, the days per HOA, we backed away from that, and it is any day. Because of the report server, we're able to monitor the number of days per week with their water.
Then am I misreading page 109? It says KMA Sunday and Wednesday, East Meadows Saturday and Tuesday.
Yeah, we put out a subsequent.
Okay. That probably came through in an email then.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
And I think there may be a typo on page 1. Okay, so this is different from what's in the board pack.
Yes, sir. We made those modifications after we talked with staff to know exactly what the report server could do for us.
Okay.
Is a recommendation to the Operations Committee to approve Resolution 15-4 as revised.
Okay.
And with the caveat that we need to inform the public of the changes compared to last year, so they, and I would say emphasize that we do have the ability to know exactly when they're using water. So I would move that we pass Resolution 15-4.
I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
15-4. Moving on to J, 8J, discussion and possible action related to the district's efforts related to the Caples Lake water rights application with the State Water Board and the Department of Public Health. Manager Sharp.
After the last meeting, district staff's next steps were to initiate discussions with the Department of Water on the possibility of drilling test wells and installing water tanks. Pleased to announce that the Department of Water will be doing an annual inspection of the district, and during that time we'll be taking a look at possible locations for water tanks in the district that they would approve of. Secondly, was to, once the project description is approved, which it has been, to distribute this to the Department of Water, the counties, Fish and Game, et cetera, for their input to flush out any possibilities of a protest. But prior to doing that, Vail has expressed an interest in assigning their unused water rights to the district. The district is waiting on a memo from the water engineer and Shanahan on the potential benefits pursuing Vail's assignment. This is not ready yet, partially because Shanahan's office has been slammed by the water conservation issue, which has caused a lot of issues in the Central Valley. This will be back before the board with the memo so that you can make a decision on Vail's assignment request at the June meeting.
Okay, so that's just an update. Anything you want to say?
I guess I was a little surprised by the way you phrased it, because in the planning committee we talked about what our view was of the proposal to accept the assignment of water rights from Vail. And I would say, just based on what I heard, it was not particularly optimistic that we would pursue that path.
Right, I gave a more thorough report to planning, and if you'd like, I can discuss that.
No, just that if people go out here with the impression that we think that in June we're going to be talking about taking assignment of rights from Vail, I don't think that's the likely path, so enough said.
Okay. Any further discussion on the water rights issue? Hearing none, we'll keep going. Discussion and possible action regarding the proposal to change the district's snow removal services operations to a property-related service. Manager Sharp.
Yes, so the Snow Removal Services Committee has actually met. We have 9 committees now, so we're getting back up there. They met on April 27th, and we discussed the top 5 reasons that would be in favor of the current or going to a property-related service, the top 5 reasons to remain with the contract service, and the snow removal comparison that we showed the board at the last meeting as far as the variable cost between 2010 and 11. Next steps that were determined was to develop a clear narrative to distribute in June, focused on the comments received, and then following up on the narrative to produce a customer survey after the July 4th meetings to get the customers' input, and then determine ways that we could save money in admin and operational from the property-related service over the currently contract service. So with that, I would turn it over to Director Epstein for any comments he might have.
Yes, so as Michael mentioned, we've had 2 meetings of the committee so far to do things. And I guess I've reached I'd like to throw out at least where I think my current thinking is based on those 2 meetings. And that is, currently we have an unregulated service. And we seem to be the last supplier standing, basically because we're the only ones who can spread our costs across other operations and run it more efficiently. We're the only ones with in-house, local staff to run it. So it's hard to imagine a scenario where a contractor will see this as a great opportunity and say, I want to do snow removal in Kirkwood. It's just hard to imagine that happening, but sometimes we're not imaginative enough. So I think we're in this situation where we're the only provider, and there's sort of 2 questions in my mind. One is, what's the best way to provide the service, and the other, is how to do it equitably. And so, in looking at moving to a sort of a regulated service governed by state law, I see tremendous benefits to our customers and huge risks for us. So the way I would describe it is the customers get plenty of benefit for it, and we assume lots of risk that can't be managed. And we would give up any ability to make rate adjustments if we were wrong in any way. That would leave up purely to the voters to decide yes or no. So it's a very tentative situation for us to put ourselves in, and the benefit to the district would just be knowing who the long-term customers are at a fixed price. And the only way to safely manage our risk would be to set the rates high enough to prevent any problems from occurring downstream. And it's a very difficult sell to take this to the community. It isn't like the community's dying to have this come in. They seem to be fairly skeptical and asking to be won over. So on that basis, I kind of feel like we now understand how difficult it would be to operate under Prop 218 and offer a service like this. And it isn't clear to me that we should proceed. And so that's kind of where I am, and I'd love to get whether other people have reached any observations yet or not. But that's my observation as chair of the committee.
Well, I certainly observed that the community is skeptical. I've had several discussions with people I'm acquainted with and talked to regularly in the Valley, and I was surprised with the vehemence of their dislike for the proposal. That really came through loud and clear to me. So it just made me. That gave me pause for reflection as to whether or not we were doing something that was going to be appreciated or not. And I have not heard much talk of appreciation as much as I have heard skepticism.
And I pretty much reached a similar conclusion to Bob. I just think there's a lot of emotion associated with where responsibility lies, and there's always skepticism as well. A government agency, once they have the service as a monopoly, will they continue to provide good quality and all that kind of stuff? And in East Meadows, of course, there's the complication that current people's properties, the costs would actually go up because of the driveway situation. But I'm also just as certain that the one-year contracts don't make sense. So I think we still need to find, I'm not sure we should proceed. I mean, I'd be fine continuing the conversation with the June narrative and so on, but I'm skeptical as you are, Bob. So if we decide not to do that, I'm fine with that. But I don't think that this ends the discussion, because I think the initial problem was that the one-year contracts don't make a lot of sense to us. So,
Right.
I think there needs to be further discussion maybe in the planning committee, and where it originated a couple of years ago.
So maybe anybody else have any?
Yeah, I guess I hear what you're saying, and I'll come back to that. For me, it would be nice to go. I would be inclined to go through with these steps, unless you're recommending that we not go through with these steps. In other words, I'd love to get some scientific feedback from the community as opposed to anecdotal feedback, unless you think we should abort it now. But if we get some scientific, because one or two people can make a lot of noise, and we don't really know, I don't think, what percentage of because what you have articulated is there is benefit. Now, the people that we've heard from don't believe that, I don't think. But if we get some feedback from the community that says, hey, it's 50-50 on going to this thing, and it's more risk, or if it's 80% don't want to, and it's more risk for us, I don't want to do it. Are you recommending we not do the narrative, or that we end the survey?
Well, let me elaborate. I think we can go through this process, so I think we can get the majority of the community to understand it's in their best interests to switch it to a service that eliminates financial risk to them. So I'm actually not worried about accomplishing that. I'm more worried about operating a snow removal service under Prop 218, where we have no ability, if we're wrong on anything, we have no ability to raise rates. And since there's a large variability on snowfall on these things, the possibility of being wrong is out there for a lot of reasons. And if our rates were wrong, if they're too high, we can always do a refund. So we have to set them high enough to sort of make sure the refund is more likely than not. If we don't set them high enough, we have to ask the voters to approve it. It's not like water, where we have to hold a public hearing and get input. The voters actually have to approve a change in the rates by majority vote. And so I think working under those constraints is difficult, and I don't think the advantages to the district outweigh that risk. But I believe that explaining out the facts, most people look at it and say, well, I can get a guaranteed price forever, and if it's not right, I have to be asked to change it. Or I can live under any arbitrary contract they choose to make at any price, which is the current situation. I don't think it would be hard to get everybody on board. It'd just be a lot of work. So the other thing I would add is, if it doesn't make sense for the district to operate under Prop 218, why
do this?
Why? Because in some sense it's misleading. We're doing something that we don't think we can really operate well under it. So that's my logic.
So your recommendation, I think, is not to go through with this.
Yes.
And terminate the consideration at this
Just
point.
say we've looked at it and we can't figure out how to operate well. And we've also put in a challenge to ourselves of operating at lower costs than we currently are. So it isn't just staying at the current rates. We've looked at trying to be less than where we currently are. So I think given everything we have to work on, I don't see a happy conclusion
Sure.
to this with or without a survey.
And Michael, is that your position too? Is that you think we've learned enough that we ought to terminate consideration of making this a service at this point?
Yeah, I think that when we first discussed this, we didn't know the rate setting. We didn't know that we would have to go to an election to raise rates. And the only way that staff would feel comfortable with this is to set rates at such an arbitrarily high number so that it would be unsaleable. it would look like we're raising rates dramatically to the community when actually all the district was doing is trying to protect ourselves over a 2011 year. Because if you have a 2011 year, the only recourse you have is you either have a snowy day fund or you raise rates and hope that the community votes for it. But the benefit of the administrative savings is not even close to being there for taking the risk of having to take on a 2011 year with 2014 revenues. So after learning that, yes, I agree with the position that I think we should look to ways to streamline our administrative process. And Bob and I have discussed several ways that we could possibly streamline it and make it an easier contract, especially if the current snow conditions continue. But continuing on this pathway just leads us to a point where we're going to be asking the community to approve rates that are untenable.
Mm-hmm. So the topic of multi-year contracts, Eric raised. I think I've heard you describe that as the worst of both worlds. What is staff's view on multi-year contracts, or haven't you explored it far enough to have a view?
We currently have single-year contracts. That actually protects the district. Now that we've stepped back and looked at it, it protects the district from the 2011 because we can adjust quickly. The only savings that the multi-year contract does is administration, and as we have seen in our numbers, it's not a huge savings in the first place. So once again, the financial risks outweigh any savings. The single year gives us the flexibility to adjust and react to snowfall conditions. I recommend no changes at this time until the planning committee can further look into this and discuss possible administrative changes to our contracts.
But Michael, remember, dial back 2.5 years or so when we just purchased the $266,000 blower, and then about 5 or 6 HOAs dropped out. Right, that's what triggered this whole conversation. You're comfortable with that situation now on a one-year contracts?
I don't know how 3-year contracts with the variable snow rate is a better deal.
In planning committee, I'll show you what Dale Rise used to do. Dale Rise did fine with 3-year contracts.
And possibly our contracts need to be looked at, where we actually start looking at variable rates for the amount of snow. I mean, if we were looking at district security, we get away from the refund issue. And we get
no, that's right. I mean, the nature of the contract, the terms of the contract would have to be modified so that, on the one hand, we're doing the best we can for all of us, all customers, in terms of the lowest rate possible, but still with the reasonable protections. They're simply reasonable, so that we're not operating at a cash loss, that we're not at that risk, and yet we're consistently competitive with anyone who might want to come into the valley to provide the service.
So
I just think it needs more discussion. I don't have a proposal.
Let's boot it back to the planning committee. Let's look at multi-year contracts. Recognize that we had a run at multi-year contracts, I think maybe before you were on the planning committee, and we concluded that wasn't a proposal we wanted to take forward.
I think what we should do is...
No, what happened, just to be clear, what happened was the planning committee, when we first formed the planning committee, one of the first things we tackled was this issue because of what happened. And Michael and Jeff Smith were going to develop a model a business model, but there was just too many other things going on with the electric out valley and everything, so we dropped it. And then it came back in the form of a possible enterprise service.
I think we dropped it because we decided we didn't like it, but we can talk about that at the planning.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is we're better off exploring how to do this without Prop 218
I agree.
as the structure.
Right.
I think that structure just adds too much risk for us to want to do it that way. That's what I learned, along with a lot of noise that I think could be resolved with enough time and energy. But why, but it is a fair amount of energy to get to yes. I think that's where we would end up.
Get them all to say yes for something that you really don't want to do.
Well,
because
that's
of risk,
kind of-
So what's the point? So,
Yeah.
so what do we need to do to wrap this up? Do we need a resolution? Do we need
Well, just in the spirit of Robert's Rules of Order, any comments or questions from the audience, which is all staff at this point?
I think my next step would be to write up a recommendation and send it back to the committee and say this is the thinking of where we are. I don't think any strong disagreement, but.
so you want to have the snow removal committee frame
No, I just let them, as a say, this is, the board discussed this is the direction, this is what we've learned from the research. And as a result, we don't think it's a good use of time to pursue it further.
I would basically say the consensus of the board is that these next steps are not the next steps, and that, we are abandoning the 218 process and kicking the concept of contract structure back to the planning committee.
That's exactly right. Yeah, right, exactly. Okay.
And, we should probably write a short summary of that to the snow removal committee and dissolve the snow removal committee.
Right, and then since we proposed this, since this was in the newsletter and there's an email, there's a communications to the community that we want to do as well.
One less thing to argue about it 4th of July. Well, I mean, it's been a
that
real,
has occurred to me.
real learning process, and we
Yeah.
investigated it. So, this Prop 218 is just the killer.
Yeah. I thought it'd be the same as water.
Yeah. We found that out.
Great. Anything else on snow removal?
Yes, actually. In your packet, you'll see the preliminary snow removal year-end numbers. These have been presented to the Finance Committee. These are not the final, these are the preliminary numbers. The final numbers, we're still under contract. Actually, we removed snow on Thursday. So the final numbers will be presented to the Finance and Board at the next meeting. And with recommendations of how much refunds should go back to the associations based on the final numbers. But based on the numbers that are before us, it should be noted that driveway contracts have never had a refund provision. We've never refunded back to driveway contracts. We are forecasting around a $10,000 savings in driveway contracts. And one concept the board might consider is to start a snowy day fund or a reserve fund or rate stabilization, however you want to call it, with the monies from these driveway contracts. So that's one issue of, when it could start off with this $10,000. The other is that we're forecasting at this point about a 20% savings from plan from the revenues received. A thought would be to not refund the entire 20% back to the associations, but possibly cut that back to the amount that we refunded last year, which was approximately 12% back to the associations, and use the remaining amount to actually to contribute to the Snowy Day Fund. This is not a decision that the board needs to make today. In fact, I don't think you really actually could until final numbers come out. It's just a thought pattern that I think Finance has talked about in the past. We will present final numbers at the next meeting before Finance first and to the board, but it is a concept of having a fund so that if a 2011 season happens again, possibly we can iron out or smooth out the rate increase for the following year because we have this fund to rely on. So with that, I open it up to questions and comments.
I think it's a good concept. I think we should have some buffer in the number. It's a variable business. It ought to have some way to respond to the variability, and it makes sense to me.
And I think it's easier than putting in a contract that this is a contract for X amount of snow, and if it over that, there's an additional surcharge. It's much easier to come up with a kind of experienced average rate and have some buffer to handle the downside and some refund. And putting a cap on the refund is kind of a way of building the buffer slowly.
I'm also in favor of it. Michael, I do have a question, which is, I think the nature of our contract is a maximum charge with a credit, not contractually guaranteed, but that practically we've been doing for low years. And I think what Eric was saying, which I didn't remember because I've been too used to the PUD mindset, is that Dale Rise and the other contractors used to have a minimum, but then in snowy years, based on the recorded snowfall at Carson Pass or something, there would be overage. And so I think that's important for the planning committee to understand. And it sounds like Eric's going there.
Yeah.
So any
Is that accurate? So that was a question. We've got a maximum, and in practicality, we've been applying a refund. And the for-profit entities used to have a minimum, and then they'd go above with more snowfall.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so Dale Rise had there was a set amount, 450 inches or whatever that might be, and then every inch above that there was a dollar amount that would increase. And every additional driveway that was installed back and that was an additional sum, $1,000 as well. So he
Right.
had those provisions in his contract.
And he did have a 3-year contract, because I think I signed one.
Yes, and Alpine Smith actually had several 3-year contracts that we actually assumed when they left the valley.
Great.
So the multi-year contract thing, I mean, I think that's I don't know how to describe it. It's, Eric talks about it being a protection against having just purchased a big snow blower and suddenly 6 customers drop out on you. But I'm not sure that a contract gives you that guarantee, because it's a performance contract, and if the customer decides they don't want to continue with it after the end of the year and they go with somebody else, how do you stop them from doing that?
Well, and if you amortize the equipment over more than 3 years, I don't think it helps.
What do you mean a performance contract? You mean a 3-year contract?
Well, if I sign a 3-year contract with Dale Rise, and at the end of year 1 I'm unhappy with Dale Rise, I just tell them forget the other 2 years. I'm not going to do business
I'm
with
not sure that's how it was written.
I don't know if the way I would look at a 3-year contract is you couldn't do that. You kind of had to be obligated to 3 years.
Except for failure to perform.
Right.
But anyway, we'll look at alternatives
Yeah.
at a future time.
But I think it's a consent. What do you think of the Snowy Day Fund?
It's not a bad idea.
Okay. So I think the consensus of the board is to keep looking into it.
That's a great name.
Yeah. So is 400.
Up on rainy days.
So is 450 inches of snow a year. 8I, discussion and possible action regarding Kirkwood Capital Partners' proposed parking lot adjacent to the wastewater treatment plant and the meadow. Manager Sharp.
Talking about 450 inch years. KCP proposed parking lot. It was on yesterday's proposed TriTac agenda, which has been canceled and is being rescheduled. It's not known when the TriTac meeting will be rescheduled. I talked to 2 of the 3 committee members Thursday, I believe it is, and they still don't know exactly when Nate will produce, KCP will produce the information that's needed. TriTac continued so that KCP could provide the additional info, a vicinity map, a better description, and probably most importantly, an alternate analysis and a justification for the parking lot. So the district will continue to be involved in the public review. Dates that I've heard is May 19th is a possible date for the next meeting, and members of the community and I have recommended June 12th, which is a Friday before the next board meeting. The second letter from the district has gone out with regards to our comments to the TriTac. The parking committee has met. There was some question at the parking committee whether it was actually going to continue as a PUD committee. The next action was for Nate and Casey to get together and to call a next meeting of the committee, and we've heard no word on that. So with that, I open it up to comments and questions.
Any comments or questions?
I guess I have a question. Do we, since there's a set of things we'd like to see happen, would we like to be responsible for, would it be appropriate for us to ask our own community to sign on to support the questions that we've asked? I mean, to do a sign-on? Or is that
A survey?
Well, it wouldn't be a survey. There's a certain set of questions and positions we've asked to give the community an opportunity to sign on to our letter saying they agree with the questions that the KMPUD is asking on their behalf.
So there was a set of questions that we originally submitted, and then there was our second letter. Which are you referring to?
Some
Both?
combination of whatever makes sense.
So it's more like a petition approach than a survey approach. Say I support the PUD asking these following questions.
Yes. The PUD speaks for me, if you will. It would serve two purposes. One, it would be a way of educating the community on what's going on in case they want to get involved. And it would say that, it would just reinforce that our representation is broader than just the board and staff.
So are you proposing that we would have items on a list of that type that would go beyond the immediate purview of PUD?
No, just whatever our current questions, positions are.
Right, because those are pretty narrowly focused on things that are our direct responsibility, like what happens with runoff to the water table on the meadow.
Yeah, I'm asking a general question because I don't know what the specifics would be, but is it worthwhile to explore having a community letter supporting our position that we would do?
Well, I think I've got to know before I would say yes or no to that, whether or not you're suggesting that it would be things beyond PUD's purview.
Oh, I don't know what I'm just saying.
Well,
Is there a set of things that for which having the community sign on to would be appropriate?
Okay, so I want to give you for instance, which is the visual impact from residences in East Meadows.
Right.
Would that potentially be on your
Sure.
list?
Yeah.
Okay,
You
so
tell
it
me
goes-
the list. I'm just saying, is there a list of things for which having the community sign on would be appropriate? The list is empty, then the answer is no.
This list isn't empty, but the list could potentially go beyond what is formerly PUD's responsibility. That's the key point. You got to understand that.
I'd be interested in your view on that, Michael, but I would be inclined preliminarily. I think that would be a good idea.
Yeah, I just don't think, I agree with Bob. I think that the letter should be formulated through the community so they can be broader and farther reaching than the narrow emphasis of
So
those.
let me be clear. I didn't say I wouldn't support it if it went beyond PUD's purview, but I said if we as a board think we're going to run a survey, we've got to know whether or not we're asking a bunch of things that are.
I'm trying to ask the narrowest possible question, not the broadest one. If we leave it to the community to do this, nobody has a good email list. If we do it, asking the community to support what we're asking for, it can be done quickly with a very good email list. We're the only entity with an accurate email list in town.
I accept that. It's an accurate statement of the practical reality.
Yeah.
Absolutely true.
Right.
I guess I would favor it because I think that, having sat through that TriTac meeting, given who those planners are and the nature of planners, I would be in favor of that sooner rather than later.
Right. So I think I would limit it to just the issues that have been identified by the district and asking for people to be educated and supported.
Would it be possible to limit it to just the district issues and have any other comments?
We would encourage them, we could give them a place, say, if you have additional comments,
Yeah.
we'll be happy to deliver them, assuming
I like
that's
that.
within
I
our...
like that idea. Have it in two parts. We recognize that our direct responsibilities are, here's what our questions are. But the community has other interests, and here's what we're hearing from the other community interests
Yeah,
are.
we could we say we'd be happy to convey any additional comments you want to provide.
I think it'd be great to do that survey or petition as quickly as possible.
But we could get it out next week.
And staff is comfortable with that direction.
I concur. It's a good idea.
Okay.
I can administer it, I just can't write it. So it's
Michael
not-
can write it,
Okay.
and he'll have plenty of help.
Okay.
The community ought to get involved in that and help write the list of things that are external to PUD. That would be kind of ideal. I mean, it impedes the speed with which it gets done, but we want to make up the public's opinion about what those other topics are.
And are those comments submitted to date on the TriTax website that they put out?
I heard from the other planners that I talked to that the El Dorado website is up to date, but I haven't checked it. So we do have a list of comments that we've received, previously and that have been submitted to TriTax. So
There's a pretty good record.
Yeah.
Well, I'll email you the letters I've gotten, which are a significant number. Anything else on snow, on parking?
no, I like the picture. And one of the concerns is of the district is that snow that's coming from the vehicle maintenance shop. Currently, that's where they move their snow to. Where's that snow going to go?
The El Dorado website does have all the public comments on it.
Moving on to general manager's report.
The first item I'd like to address is that due to the extreme drought and lack of any snow melt, if the mandated discharges would have been followed, the lake level of Cable's Lake following the EID would have been in jeopardy. And this is a picture of the lake level during the construction of the dam. You'll see in your packet the various lake levels, and I am very pleased to announce that due to the district's and others' their interest, FERC has approved the resolution for a stream flow variance for EID. And so right now we're projecting that Cable's Lake will have 12,000 gallons in it, or 12,000 acre feet in it by the end of November, which is considerably up above forecasts that have been reported on before. So I think this is a real positive impact, and FERC approved the stream flow variance report based on comments received. So thanks to the board for passing the resolution and keeping abreast of this. We will have a boating and we will have a normal fish stocking year in 2015. So at a subsequent board meeting, I'll be showing you pictures of trophy fish being slammed into Cable's Lake and Silver Lake.
Good.
As far as the manager's report, one of the items that we discussed at our operations meeting is the use of reclaimed water due to the severe drought. We have researched this in the past and been frustrated by the number of regulatory hurdles that you have to do to use reclaimed water in any fashion. You have to do a project description, which we're very familiar with. You have to complete SEQA requirements. You have to prepare a Title 22 report. You have to file a reported waste discharge with the regional board for a master reclamation permit. You might need to do an anti-degradation analysis and then final approval of your master reclamation permit. The good news is that, well, the bad news is that all those regulations are still there. The good news is that the perception of the government has really changed with the use of reclaimed water, and instead of being a roadblock, there's much more open doors as far as use of reclaimed water and fast tracking of such, especially if you can offset the use of irrigation water that you're currently using. So if we had a tank that we could put it back on the truck and use, put treated effluent into it in water areas that we currently have sprinklers on, I feel that the approval process would go much smoother than it has in the past. You need to inform the public with little signs that you're using non-potable water, but any way that you can take away from using regular water with reclaimed is getting more of a green light with the state due to Governor Brown's issuance. So the Operations Capital Committee discussed this, and I didn't know if you had any comments.
Well, it also gives us an opportunity to recharge our absorption beds by not pumping as much water in there. If we can divert some of that to landscaping and aesthetic uses, it's a win-win. I think for not a large amount of money spent for a tank, that'd be fairly cheap. And if we just charge people for the labor involved with having a driver, go over there twice a week or something. So it's opened the door to something that we've investigated a long time ago and came to the conclusion we couldn't afford.
And continuing on, in your packet is a draft of the Consumer Confidence Report on page 145. I think staff has done a very good job in reformatting this and making it a much more readable document. This will actually be posted on our website once completed, and there'll be a notification in the newsletter that's available for downloading. So if you have any comments, this will be in the June newsletter. Kirkwood Summer Festival information is in your packet, and Assistant Manager Ansel is here to give us an update.
Yeah, on May 1st, the Summer Festival Barbecue Committee met, and we're moving forward. As of today, we have 6 wineries signed up and 4 breweries. The pre-registration flyer went out in the April billing, and so we're continuing to move forward and looking forward to a good event.
Moving on, also in your packet is the notification of the Kirkwood All Mountain Cleanup. This is something Vail has put on and the district participates in. We typically take the area of the meadow where we have most of our property, and we also have our easements, so all district staff, or at least most of district staff, will be out there picking up trash with Vail employees on the May 15th event next week. As far as new business, a community member has brought up that there is a considerable amount of equipment stored, old equipment stored on the school site, and that the district should possibly be involved in the cleanup. This was discussed in the planning committee meeting and the operations committee meeting, and staff was directed to work with KCP to clarify ownership and responsibility according to the APA. And so I'll be working with Nate Whaley to clearly identify whose responsibility that items is and on whose land it is, so that the appropriate steps can be made.
But is any of that stuff in the boneyard a district property?
No.
So none of that stuff in the boneyard is our property?
No, we removed all of the district's property upon closure of the APA.
But there's a perception in the community to the contrary, so I think we need to clarify that. And that's what the committee wanted, to get done. And also to clarify are there PCBs in those transformers? What kind of a liability is involved in removing them, and what costs would be incurred?
Okay. I certainly would like to have you make it very public that none of that stuff is ours. And if there are toxic chemicals there or contaminated soil that affects, in general, and especially if it affects our water, our drinking water, I'd like to see you address that appropriately.
So what's the name of the entity that owns these?
I think it's called Kirkwood Capital Partners, formerly known as Kirkwood Mountain
So
Resort.
we could put a sign on a property.
It's kind of a disaster over there.
Yeah, but we could do a little signage.
Kirkwood Capital Partners.
Yeah, property on Kirkwood Capital Partners, put a visible sign there.
Is neon appropriate or not?
I'd use, yeah, neon orange.
Billboard, what do you call this?
Legally, we could do that?
But I don't know.
Put it on our piece of property, it says everything behind this sign belongs to
There you
those
go,
other guys. Yeah.
With a big arrow.
Yeah.
And finally, if you look at the window out in the parking lot, I think you'll see a snowcat. This snowcat is the one that we have discussed several times in operations and possibly at the board. This is a snowcat that is surplus from Vail. They have worked on it. They have gotten it running. And I've talked to Casey tomorrow. It is now available for staff to run it, to operate it, for district mechanics to take a look at it. Staff will inspect it and then ask for opinions from appropriate individuals and report back at the next board meeting. But so if you want to take a ride, please let us know. That concludes the manager's report.
Well, while we have you, two questions from the board packet. One, there was a $4,500 invoice associated with the inspection for the fiber optic failure. Are we asking for reimbursement for that? That wasn't clear to me in the RCI's letters.
I think there was a $4,500 invoice for the repair of the fiber.
Okay.
And that is part of the claim against Q&D for this. And we've also received a bill from Exponential, which we refused to pay, and they've agreed to credit it based on the design of the repairs for the fiber. So not only are we asking for Q&D to take care of the cost of the repair of the fiber, but we're asking Exponential to design the repair and inspect the repair at their own cost.
Thank you. And then the second question is, I see that you did send out the revised water alerts, and I understand why with the report server, which we talked about on Wednesday. But the red line in the package said the conservation stage shall be recommended by the general manager, and you went back to the language of determined by the general manager. Why the changes?
That was not intentional.
Okay.
It was supposed to be that the water stage alert should be recommended by the general manager, but approved by the district board based on the level of the aquifer level 4 or at the discretion of the board. So I will look at that before the final.
Okay, so in the packet it said recommended. It was a red line change. And in this version, the red line has been deleted, so it's determined, which was the original language. And your intention is recommended but determined by the board?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So any questions for Michael on general manager's report? Committee reports, planning?
The only thing on the planning agenda that I would mention is that we have an obligation for an annual self-assessment of each of the committees. We just calendared ours for the planning committee. The rest of the committees might want to be reminded that that is an obligation. So.
Okay.
We're afraid to have another power outage.
Maybe you could add that into your chart.
Finance?
I think we really covered everything.
Yeah. Operations, capital projects?
We're good.
Personnel, we haven't met since then. General discussion, opportunity for board members to ask questions for clarification, provide information to staff, committee updates, request staff to report back on a matter, or to direct staff to place a matter on a subsequent agenda. Anything?
Well, I guess I'd say I really appreciated seeing the budget material today. I think your point that we're a long ways down the road from where we were a few years ago was really spot on. And I think being able to look down range 5 years and figuring out just what are the implications of the difficult situation in which we find ourselves, I think that was much more clear to me today. And I think that's really terrific progress. Very nice.
I'm happy that we don't have a $1.6 million Out Valley upgrade plan, and embarrassed that I missed that we were $1.2 million short on this substation.
Luckily we realized that.
now we have 5 months of budget to live and learn. Great. So at this point, we adjourn the meeting and go on a facilities tour, or do we don't adjourn the meeting? We just go.
We actually don't adjourn the meeting.
Right.
This is part of the board. You can discuss things that we're looking at. This is not we're continuing on. We would return here and then adjourn the meeting.
Okay. If there's ambiguity about that trash in the boneyard being ours, maybe you can clear that up in our newsletter in a diplomatic way.
Sure.
I also asked Michael to write a note to Nate, telling him what our position was, offering him the opportunity to have us clean it up at his cost if that was a practical consideration. He was trying to help. He didn't have the ability to see the big stuff anymore, so.
I'm not going to join in the tour, but still have a quorum for not adjourning.